Hello everybody and welcome to the Civilization Battle Royale X Season 2 Power Rankers podcast, also known as the CBRX 2 PRCast. You are joined by three of your Power Rankers, which just so happen to be all three of the administrators of the Power Rankings team. I am JMAngelo67, also known as TickieJames on Twitch and VideoJames on YouTube. How are all of you? I'm also joined by my co-leaders, Admiral Cloudberg.
Hello.
Very excited as always. And my other co-leader, Lacsirax Ariscal.
All hail JMAn.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I think we should steal the intro from the "Well, There's Your Problem" podcast, where they just say, "My name is X, and I'm the person speaking right now."
Uh I guess. I'm not really too familiar with too many podcasts, but I suppose
I don't know if they're the only ones who do it. This is the only place I've heard it though.
right. So, anywho, just to talk, so this is our fourth episode, which will be labeled as episode 3 on YouTube and on Twitch. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting. Send us a subscribe, send us a follow, send us an anything on Twitch or YouTube. Give us some Reddit karma. We'd all really appreciate it. But I do want to share that today's format is going to be a little bit different than what we're used to for anybody who's been watching the PRcast previously. Usually we start with the topic of biggest movers. However, Lax, do you want to explain why we're not going to do that this time around?
Just that, obviously the further we get on in the game, the less dramatic a lot of the movers get, and a lot of it becomes almost more statistical noise at times. So I figured rather than do that, we could just look at some of the key regions, pick out some key points, which would allow us to talk about, more than just the civs that are shifting around radically, and focus on some of the more interesting civs that, might be slowly climbing to the top, or some of the civ dynamics that might be going on in certain areas as well. It's kind of similar to what we did for CBRX Season 1's PRcasts. So if you watch them, you'll be familiar with it. Should be.
Yeah, absolutely, and it also helps that we didn't really have too many big movers in the rankings this time around, unlike previous episodes. As the episodes start to go on, as we get later into eras in the game, positions will be a lot less dynamic. So, for example, we won't have Burkina Faso jump from 24th to 1st, barring something amazing like we did at the beginning of the season. But yeah, so without further ado, let's just kind of get into it. So the first major talking point we want to talk about is we do want to talk about a rank. It's PARG, the Provisional Russian Government, aka White Russia. They're number one again. They are, forgive me if I'm wrong, the first civilization to maintain the number one position in the power rankings for season 2 for longer than an episode, correct?
Yeah.
That is correct.
So what do we want to talk about with these guys? I mean, obviously, they are the top dogs, but is that a position that they can maintain? Because maintaining for an episode is great and all, but what have they done to deserve this position, and is it really something that they can hold on to for a long period of time, if not for the rest of the game?
They could hold on to it if they want, but like at the same time, I can think of many things that would cause me to drop them out at first at the drop of a hat. So like I think they're not really that much better than any other civ. They just like have good stats and a lot of space, and there's no reason to believe that that position is permanent, or that it has to be permanent. Yeah.
No, I mean, of course, if it was permanent, we'd be saying they're definitely going to win the game, which of course we're not doing. I guess what I'm interested in is why are they first? And I think you sort of touched on it there, Claire. It's a bit of a two-pronged attack, really, of them having very superlative stats for this point of the game, having settled really, really well, except that a couple of settles in the last episode, which are sort of straying into the Russian Arctic, slightly more wasteful cities. But in general, settled really well and built up some incredible production science stats. But also the fact they have that space still, which is something that a lot of these other big stat civs I'm thinking Germany. I'm thinking the Vandals. They're running out of that very quickly. Parg, I'm going to worry about that, and they're still settling very rapidly, and they can keep going for probably another 4 or 5 episodes before they're going to run out of room.
I
And at the moment there isn't any other Civ I think that blends that sheer amount of statistical prowess with a big amount of space to expand into. The closest one maybe is actually Punjab, who have a fair bit of space to the north of them, and unsurprisingly they're also our number 2 ranked Civ. So
I also think it might be important to point out that unlike all the other civilizations that have built a world wonder so far, PARG have built 2, one of which is the Great Library, arguably a significant early wonder, and then alongside that they have also built Templo Mayor. So even though these aren't necessarily, the best of the world wonders by far, they still provide at least a significant boost to their future. Templo Mayor potentially creating... Oh, are you going to tell me that they didn't actually build Templo Mayor?
Well, no, I will tell you that. I should correct you before Aaron corrects you. They are not the only Civ to have built 2 wonders. The Kulin have also built 2 wonders.
I'm seeing the Temple of Artemis, and that's it.
That you certainly have, because I'm putting it on my map.
Oh, and Chemsongdai. Okay, I see that. You are correct. The Kulin have built 2 of some of the more important wonders in the game. But I would argue the Kulin are less of a threat to the world than the PARG potentially.
Definitely. Yeah.
Definitely.
So I think it's probably important to remember that at this point in every battle royale, the number 1 Civ is basically a big North Asian Civ with a lot of room, and and so it's like okay, yeah, they're probably up there for the same reason that we had the Kamugs and Kazakhs ranked high at this point in season 1, and and why Sibir was good, and so on and so on. So it's like, I don't know if there's that much new to add there.
Also, so I suppose the question is, are they superlative in relation to Civs like Sibir and the Kazakhs, or are they just another early overperforming North Asian Civ?
I mean,
do you think there's anything that makes a difference between them and those other North Asian ones you just mentioned?
I think they're doing better than the Kazakhs did early, but generally I don't think the difference is that big.
Right. I believe that the best North Asian Civ we've had so far was the Sibir Khanate. I think far and away that those guys were really taking the game in stride. I think the major difference between them and PARG is that PARG still has yet to take on a significant war. They have been at war with Perm, but at the same time...
It's only episode 3, give them a chance.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that, but they took Berezniki and they raised Berezniki, and then on top of all that, unlike previous civilizations in the Battle Royale, Siberia has been extra tundrified, and on top of that, the Ural Mountains are more pronounced, so as to prevent civilizations like PARG from taking out Great Perm early. So that's... to me, is a handicap that PARG are experiencing. And so, personally, I don't find PARG's position as top dog as, the strongest. In fact, I'm one of the few rankers that doesn't agree with them being in first place. I would much rather see USSR or perhaps, I don't know,
well, your number 2 is Mapuche.
Well, I think
Mapuche at number 1.
Kind of, which is really interesting, given that the Mapuche are ranked like 42nd in terms of stats.
Right. But... So we can get into my Mapuche ranking later, because
we'll be talking about,
at least we could probably all agree that my Mapuche ranking is still reasonable given the circumstances of where they are.
I actually don't think it's reasonable at all. But
okay.
We'll get to that.
No, we don't disagree.
All right.
Well, we will talk about them soon.
Yeah.
I have a very a very South American take, which I think has been a long time coming, but isn't reflected in the ranks yet, which we'll see soon. Anyway, I guess that's enough on Parg. Shall we move to one of our actual biggest changes in ranks then?
Yeah, go
Um,
ahead. Read what you
a
wrote.
little
I love what you
a
wrote.
little
It's funny.
section that I've titled "I Want to Get Off This Wild Burkinabe Ride," or "How the Power Rankers Are Destroying All Confidence in Themselves with Their Erratic Burkina Faso Rankings."
Yeah, that's like
Um,
after they fell from first to 44th in episode 2. Like when I put on this, I put the caption on the slide, it was just like a, stonks meme but going down. It's like Power Rankers collective credibility. So here we are, we're continuing to go.
So no,
um,
no, we're not at all. I don't think any of us should be blamed for how Burkina Faso has fluctuated in the ranks so heavily in the first 3 episodes. Considering, listen, these guys had the most cities on episode 1. That automatically puts them in a position to be number 1 to begin with. Then on top of that, they got hit really hard by losing 2 cities through the jungles to Nigeria, and now they're in a position where they're still a very big empire, but they're still under threat. So yes, they're in the top 20, but their stats are good. They have a lot of cities, so they're not necessarily all that bad.
well, yeah, I think that's one of the main things, Jay. It's that when we left episode 2, they had lost 2 cities. They didn't refound any other cities, so they were just a 3-city civ that had just lost a painful war. And we knew Nigeria obviously were ascending, and we knew the Vandals to the north were ascending as well.
Right.
By the end of episode 3, on the other hand, they had 7 cities. So they founded 4 cities that episode, which is as many as many as I think Hejaz founded, as many as Parg founded. Parg maybe founded one more. But they had a big settling spree, much like they did in that episode 1, which is still really good in the early game, even though they did lose those 2 cities early. It's really nice to see them continue with that thirst for growth, which puts them kind of counter to a civ like Nigeria, who have so far only founded 1 extra city, by on the capital per episode. So they founded 1 city episode 1, 1 city episode 2, 1 city episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
So
if they continue doing that, by about episode 40, they're going to be unstoppable.
Sure. Um, if
One
they
city
play
per
their
episode,
cards
never
right,
stop.
if they play their cards right, they could be a real contender.
Did someone say play their cards right?
I would also note the closest Civ capital to Burkina Faso right now is arguably one of the best opportunities they could possibly have. It's the Tuareg. So the Tuareg, just to remind anybody that's not aware, the Tuareg's unique ability, Blue Men of the Desert, makes it so that desert tiles are harder to move through. Imagine having a Great Wall permanently built around your desert tiles, and that's what the Tuareg have.
Yeah.
But on the same hand, Burkina Faso being next door neighbors just to the capital of the Tuareg makes it extremely easy for this very low military civilization that hasn't really done anything impressive so far other than continue to slide up the rankings ever slowly due to the failings of others. They could lose their capital quite easily to Burkina Faso, and getting a capital at any point in the game is a huge bonus for any civilization.
Yeah, they could do it. I think, honestly, if the Tuareg had attacked Burkina Faso when Nigeria did, we'd be in a completely different situation right now. We'd probably be talking about the Tuareg having Burkina Faso's capital.
Right.
but
That would be very, very difficult to come to terms with as a power ranker. If the number 1 civilization in episode 1 lost cities to civilization ranked 56th or 54th or what have you.
Yeah, that would have been. I mean, would have been hilarious. Actually, I mean, as much as I joke about Burkina Faso killing our credibility, I actually don't think that in hindsight I would have done anything different. I mean, I still think after episode 1, Burkina Faso was second place at best, not first. But that's a small difference, and really, yeah. So no, I don't think I really would have done anything that different. They've just like had a real roller coaster of a game.
Absolutely, absolutely. But do we want to get off the Burkinabe train right now? I think
yeah,
we
sure.
can adequately excuse some of our rankings for some of these civilizations because I think people who are viewing the Civilization Battle Royale we'll see how we're ranking Burkina Faso and go, yeah, no, they're totally warranted in how they're ranking them currently. Not to
Hopefully.
mention their growth all the way to the coast, gives them an advantage that they didn't originally have. Aside from the city they lost, I think it was Banfora to Nigeria at the
Yeah,
beginning. Speaking of
it
Nigeria,
was.
before we move off Burkina
I think it was
Faso,
Wahiguya, but yeah.
oh, Awahiguya. So do we want to mention what's super interesting about Nigeria before we move on?
They have like by far the most culture.
And science,
Yeah,
and a fairly strong military to boot.
Yeah,
yeah.
Nigeria are odd ones.
Yeah, we
I mean,
we
again,
we
like you say,
wanted to
they're
write them off so early on, and now all of a sudden, in terms of this early game so far, they are one of the biggest stars.
Yeah, I mean, it's Africa's a strange constant moment because there's a lot of different powers with a lot of different assets to them. You've got Zaire, who have got a lot of room to expand still on really nice land, decent stats, and have already proven they can bully their neighbors. You've got Nigeria, who have the stats like you would never believe. You've got the Vandals, who have the interesting empire shape, quick expansion, the naval bias, and the sort of the meddling. And then you've got Burkina Faso, as we just mentioned, who are a little bit the odd ones out here, and the Ptolemies. I haven't even mentioned the Ptolemies. But so you've got all these powers that are like actually really strong in their own fields, and it's actually going to be really, really interesting to see who comes out on top because at the moment I find it really difficult to call.
Well, it's
I mean,
definitely going to be the
it's no surprise,
Tuareg. Let's
like
be real.
Zaire, Ptolemies, Nigeria, and the Vandals. They were all in like our top like 15.
Right.
And it's kind of wild when you have four civs that are that close to each other, which are all so high.
Absolutely.
Yeah, some of them are gonna fucking die.
Yeah, some of them are
Well,
going to die, and some people are going to be very unhappy. ECH points out 800 military score between Tuareg and Burkina Faso.
I don't know. Is that a lot?
Yeah, that's quite a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
1,500 is like the average military score on the whole cylinder at the moment. So that's like half a military worth.
Yeah, so Tuareg just generally has half the military of Burkina Faso. It sounds like.
Well, I don't know what Burkina Faso's actual stats are, but yes.
I would look at the info addict sheet, but I'm very lazy.
I can probably do that for you.
Yeah, becoming a
no,
teacher
we
has
removed all that
made
from the
me
power
just
ranking sheet for
tired.
reasons that are unbeknownst to me. So no.
Yeah.
Anywho, do we want to move on now to the European field for a moment?
You're skipping over one.
I'm skipping over a few. I put a thing at the bottom on my list being like, I think we should actually move this one further to the top because I think it's more interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll come back to the list as it's ordered in a bit. Well, I wanted to talk about one of the most interesting rivalries between two huge powers. I think we're already seeing on the board. Interesting, especially because it has its historical basis as well, and that's the European supremacy battle between Germany and the USSR. Which has started much like one iconic conflict between Germany and the USSR is the good old partition of Poland.
Except it's the Teutonic Order. But
yes,
I mean, they're
non-Polish
basically Polish, even though they
Sure.
speak
well,
German and they live in
not ethnically,
Danzig.
but yes.
I mean, it's almost a mirror, really.
It would always have been called Germany until 1945, but yes. So this is really interesting because Germany and USSR are both very, very highly ranked in the rankings. There wasn't a widespread agreement over who was ranked higher. I, for example, put USSR higher, but Germany ended up higher overall. But it's safe to say these two civs are both very, very tight at the moment in the rankings, and obviously being so close to each other now, bordering each other, we wouldn't be surprised to see them go to war soon either. And yeah, I want to get your take. So, I put USSR higher than Germany. Am I right in thinking somebody here put Germany higher than USSR? Probably.
I put Germany like one or two places higher than the USSR, which at this point in the game really doesn't very much. So I think they're both very strong. I probably the reason I put Germany higher is, well, for one, they have this they have that unique ability that gives them like more production for each war that they're in, or something like that.
Yes.
Which is
The
exactly what you want in their position. USSR doesn't really have any relevant abilities like that, especially the increased production. So I think in a head-to-head between them, eventually, unless the USSR got much bigger, Germany would probably win out. I also think just Germany has a history of more aggression and expansion than the USSR does. So, but otherwise, there's not a lot to go on between to choose between the two.
Well, I think the one thing I sort of highlighted, um, looking at the region more holistically rather than just looking at those two countries as well, is that um, for me, Germany's neighbours now with Teutonics gone, they're actually none of them are particularly soft. None of them are rollovers. You've got the Gauls, who are probably the closest to one, although they are currently in the era of their unique unit, which is very powerful. So they're not exactly the sort of nation you want to pick. Germany picked them at the right time, basically. You've got two Sicilies who, again, they're going up in the ranks, are doing well, and also kind of protected by the Alps. It's going to be difficult for Germany to crack them. You've got Kosovo, who I think are quite underrated. Their stats are actually pretty decent as well. Science letting them down, but other than that, not a bad-looking civ. But on the other hand, USSR, their rivals include Finland, who are still only on 3 cities, Great Perm, who are only on 4 cities and obviously are being bullied by Prague just over the mountains, and Georgia's 2 constituent parts split into
three
north,
constituent
north
parts
and
now.
south. Well, yes, they don't border the third one, but yes.
Yeah, Stalin obviously decided to take over his homeland for this iteration of the Civ Battle Royale of Georgia. So
yeah, I think
yes.
USSR definitely does have more opportunities for expansion than Germany does. So it remains to be seen what will come of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I think that's why I have USSR over Germany for now, just because to me it looks like they have less threats and also more expansion capabilities. Also, I don't think at this point they could be coalitioned. I still think Germany could be. If the Gauls, Kosovo, and maybe a burgeoning Swedish navy, which probably materialized in an episode or two. If they all declared war simultaneously, I think Germany would really struggle. USSR, on the other hand, Georgia, Perm, and Finland, I think they'd be fine. That's another reason I think I just edged them a little bit higher. But yes, it is very close, and obviously Germany do have the capital, Marienburg, the Teutonic capital, the first captured capital of the whole game.
just a heads up, ECH asks a question in chat. Any chance of Frankfurt being in danger right now?
Oh yeah, somebody commented on the like replied to my comment on the episode post or something. It was like 2 Sicilies are definitely going to take Frankfurt. I just don't think they will. They have like 3 units around it, and while they are damaging the city, it's like it wouldn't really be very easy for Germany to come in and defend that.
I won't say that you're wrong. I would just say that there is a chance. It's just not a good chance. The same way how
Yeah, I think it's
last
possible.
PRCast.
Would I say it's probable? Absolutely not.
Yeah, it's not probable, but
Yeah.
it's just like how last episode of the PRCast I was saying, I don't know, Cloudberg, I think the Chukchi can take a city from Japan. You're like, you're an idiot, you have no idea.
Well, I don't think Japan had even founded that city at that time, had they?
They had founded Nagorora. Nagorora was founded in episode 2.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, I didn't even know about that city. So
I tried mentioning
that
it to
explains
you
why I
like
said
multiple times. I was like, dude, there's a city right there that they could take.
I
And
assumed you were talking about the other city on Honshu because I literally had no idea about this other city that put in Kamchatka, or I wasn't thinking about it.
look at us go, guys. We're power rankers,
Yeah.
and we have no
Anyway,
idea what's going on in the game.
I was totally sure they founded this episode before it got taken.
No. They took that through their own gumption.
Should we head to another topic, or anyone want to say on Germany and Soviets?
I haven't said much about it, but I will say I think at the end of the day, where USSR is struggling is that they're absolutely surrounded, and I do think they have the capability of overtaking the civilizations around them, unless Georgia does what I want them to do and become super powerful. But
yeah, Georgia's gonna absorb the USSR. I'm calling it now.
I would die of laughter. I'd be so happy. Cause I'm like secretly a Georgia fan in the sense that, you know, I'm sitting there knowing like these guys probably aren't gonna do anything, but if they do something, I'd be really happy about it.
I became a Georgia fan the moment they decided to just settle random places all over the world. I
Right,
want
the
to see,
moment they
there's this
decided
huge gap in Western China. I want to see them settle that. I
they
mean,
they,
I think
Yeah.
they sat there and they went, you know, it'd be really cool settling to Nietzsche. Let's see how that goes.
There's a
Um,
very real future where Georgia and Japan could go to war with each other and fight a genuine conflict over like Central Asian colonies,
yeah, absolutely.
I want
and
to.
I
Yeah,
can't wait.
you heard it here first.
That's
Um,
a spicy prediction from Lacsirax Ariscal. Add it to Predcon.
given we were talking about the Chukchi and Japan, I think we'll move on to another topic I've put out here, which is the Icy Titans, and I want to talk about the continued successes of both the Chukchi and of Iceland, two civs that we actually touched on last time in conjunction with each other, but I'm still really interested in them as sort of these concurrent powers, both obviously in the north, in the Arctic Circle, but at different sides of the globe.
I don't know
Obviously,
if there's that much to say
the Earth
about
being a
Iceland
cylinder in this
this
world,
episode.
they're not anywhere near each other. But
Yeah, I don't know if there's any much to say about Iceland this episode. They didn't do a lot. They settled North America, but we already knew they were going to do that last episode, and they didn't settle
it's true.
anything else.
They didn't lose it, and it is a nice settlement. I really like where they've placed it. Actually, it's up in on the Gaspé Peninsula in Quebec province, just north of New Brunswick.
It's in New Brunswick. It's on the south side of the Gulf, but which I thought was a little
Well,
weird.
yeah.
But by the way, it completely blocks in the neutrals.
Yes.
Navally, which as if they needed to get even more fucked.
God, remember when we put the neutrals in top 10 for
Oh,
episode
don't
0?
talk about it.
I do want to talk about the quote-unquote Icy Titans. I think it's interesting to note that these two civilizations are becoming powerful for totally separate reasons. You have Iceland on the one hand, who, despite not having the best land available to them in terms of settling, just have so much of it, so much unexpected land, that they really are going to start bouncing through the rest of the ranks just based on how many cities can they settle, and then just going from there. Whereas the Chukchi are a tad more militaristic than Iceland, in my opinion, and aren't so much
no,
benefited.
certainly.
What was that?
Certainly.
Yeah, certainly more militaristic, but where they differ from Iceland is that rather than benefit off of the land available to them, they don't actually have a lot in reality. They're more so benefiting off of the conflicts that are occurring in Northeast Asia and in Japan, where they can start digging in because they have their backs against a wall, but since everybody in front of them is fighting, they're using the wall as a shield rather than as a hindrance or a handicap. And I really love watching that happen because they're slowly gaining tiles. They gained a city. They're getting more and more land in Siberia. They're getting more and more breathing room. And I'm thinking, given enough time and based off of their unique ability, that they could really become a top contender, at least in Northeast Asia. And that's kind of why a lot of us ranked them so much higher. Yes, random strategy. Oh, thank you for the follow, Composite, too. But yes, the Iceland has a larger military, but also keep in mind that Iceland didn't really have a significant war that they just got through. The Chukchi did. And the Chukchi also have far less
Literally
production.
on screen right now, Iceland fighting whales.
yeah, you know,
There's
very
like
ironic.
a fair amount of fighting going on in that picture.
Right, but they didn't really lose a significant amount of units. It wasn't as brutal a war as, say, the Chukchi and Japan. And not to mention that Iceland has far more production in general than the Chukchi do. The Chukchi are mainly surviving off of the little food that they're getting in the tundra tiles. And then northern Japan.
And as I wrote in Iceland's write-up for this week's power rankings, the fact that the neutrals aren't expanding in North America gives Iceland so much more room than anyone expected they would have. So really, they can just keep settling west across northeastern Canada and probably right up to the edge of the Dene and be just fine.
Yeah,
So,
it's really crazy how the only threat to Icelandic expansion right now is literally New Netherland, and that's the dumbest thing anyone could ever say.
They're not even really a threat. I don't think there is. There is no threat to Iceland's expansion currently.
Right. I'm just saying the only thing preventing them
Yeah.
from settling further along the coast of the United States is this somehow, decent amount of city, New Netherland civilization.
Yeah, and I mean they don't even need to settle down there. They've got plenty of land anyway. So, oh, and Aaron points out the
Oh my
Chukchi
God.
actually have more production than Iceland.
You're kidding.
Yes.
Listen, I didn't write down my statements before this, and I wish, I wish Aaron and Senshi both, when they're both in the chat, they're like, JMAn, you are an idiot. And I'm like, listen, I know I'm an idiot, but let me prove how much further I'm an idiot.
Honestly, Aaron should be in this podcast. He'd just correct. He could correct us more efficiently that way.
Yeah, I think last time we asked, he has because obviously Aaron lives in France, so it's about 12:30 there, and he has roommates who would be very annoyed.
Yeah, that makes it awkward.
As much as we enjoy Aaron's presence, it makes a lot of sense as to why he cannot be here.
I quite like him. I quite like having him as the sort of the unheard corrector, if that makes sense.
Right. I do want to figure out how to get Twitch chat on the screen, so that when we have moments like that, anybody who's watching from YouTube or something can just go, this guy just pointed out that JMan's dumb. So I'll figure that out eventually.
Don't worry, we'll read it and point it out.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, does anybody else have anything to say about the quote-unquote icy titans and their different avenues to becoming powerful civilizations?
Yeah, one thing I think is interesting about the Chukchi is they'll actually have a new neighbor soon. In fact, they sort of have a new neighbor now. It's but only just come into play, which is the Chinook. One of the other really one of the civs that have been quite quiet, but quite quietly building up.
Yeah, the Chinook have great stats. They're settling into Alaska, outflanking the Dene. It's like I think I sort of assumed Chukchi would get like the western part of Alaska, but I'd say that assumption is probably in question due to the way that the Chinook are expanding.
So that's and the Chukchi is sort of focusing on Asia.
Right.
But I think it's going to be interesting to see, starting with next episode, their interplay with each other. Obviously, we're talking about the Chukchi's core next to the Chinook's most far-flung colonies, which I think, on the face of it, probably favors the Chukchi. But on the other hand, the Chinook city's in a nice little position in South Alaska as well. I think it's going to be quite difficult to attack. So we'll see. I think that's going to be an interesting little sort of area of frisson in the near future. Should we move? Given that we just started talking about North America, both flanks of it, the Chinook and the neutrals in the Netherlands. I want to talk a little bit about the shifting. What's the word? The shifting power dynamics. That's it in North America, because I think last episode was really interesting for that. In particular, a certain grand comeback that might be in the making. From a civ who lost a city back in episode 2, but has replaced it and more now with quite a few cities, and the stats are sort of rising again. They're looking quite interesting. That's of course Rio Grande.
Yeah, Rio Grande is performing a sort of miniature Burkina Faso, where it's like they lost a city and they're like, well, we do not give a damn. So they, I think, yeah, they could start doing really well, but at the same time, also like, it's not clear who they're gonna attack. They're going to run out of space for new cities pretty soon, and Mississippi is not a great target. The Olmecs, as we've already seen, are not a great target because the terrain sucks. They could attack Tongva, but I'm not convinced they would take a city. They could try, though. So I think I invested in Rio Grande in the stock market because I still think they have potential to go up. I'm just not sure how far that goes.
Right. It's really a question of how flimsy or how solid their military ends up being. With neighbors like the Olmecs, which are far smaller but have a far more condensed military, at least based on the average amount of episodes that we've had.
Actually, correction, I sold Rio Grande this episode because I don't think they're going to go up that much farther.
There you go.
Yeah, I bought them last time and cashed in.
Also, just as an aside, Lax, when you're saying, "Oh, well, we had a civilization that lost a city but has now replaced that city and gone above," I got confused for a moment. I went, "Wait, when did 3 affiliated tribes settle another city? I don't remember."
So, no, one thing that's interested, Tats have not settled another city, but have you seen their stats recently?
I am not
No.
familiar with them.
They're quite good. They're a lot better than you'd think. They have comparable production to the Dene. They have a bigger military than the Dene.
I don't think it's gonna save them. I mean, they're just,
I don't necessarily either, but I do find it interesting that this civ that we kind of write off as the runt civ right in the middle of America. I still think being surrounded by everyone else is going to be essentially the death knell for them. But
I still haven't written off the 3 affiliated tribes. I said that last episode. You know, they still have an opportunity to make it back. I mean, depending on a well placed war, the Dene could be in real trouble because they are still, despite their size, a tundra heavy civ.
yeah, I mean the Dene also didn't have much of an episode. This episode, they got another city out, but other than that,
Oh yeah, ECH notes that next episode, New Netherlands are going to settle Florida and receive the meth-fueled power that this brings to any civilization.
Right,
Here.
right. The power of
yeah,
being able to
they-
fire a shotgun at a hurricane.
yeah, they settled Florida on turn 90, so we already know that from the info dumps that are one turn ahead of where the episode ends.
Yeah.
So
So
obviously, despite Rio Grande's and TAT and New Netherlands all having little bumps, our top dog on the continent still Mississippi. Is that deserved? Is that earned? Is that under threat? What do we think?
I mean, they have the disadvantage of being in the middle, but I think in terms of everything else, they're pretty clearly the strongest. And they're strongest in the stats.
Right.
I mean, they did great settling episode 2 and also took a seat from Rio Grande. Unfortunately, they didn't actually settle in the city last episode, which does worry me a bit. But they do have a settler and a rather large little army.
They have 2 more settlers going out, and they have a military that's moving northward and may be going to attack the Dene. I have no idea if they'll succeed with that, but
yeah,
it's worth noting.
It's also notable that of all the civilizations that we consider a quote-unquote powerhouse, they're one of only 3 major powers that do not have a coastal city yet.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the USSR doesn't have a coastal city, and I would argue that and PARG doesn't have a coastal
Barg
city.
doesn't.
But...
Yeah, I mean it's like good luck. I mean, even if Park stays #1 for the next 40 episodes, they probably still won't have a coastal city.
Right.
Park aren't going to need a coastal city for a long time, whereas Mississippi, if they want to get attacking New Netherlands, for example, they could be doing with a navy. But Rio Grande have really cut them off from that by saying.
Yeah, I think they would have to attack. They'd have to attack Rio Grande again to get a good coastal city on the Gulf.
Right.
But I think those cities aren't too well defended. I think they could easily do it. So.
Yeah, I mean Monclova they'd have to raise if they wanted to turn that into a coastal city because it's actually inland. But Tampico is coastal. They could get them one coastal city.
How much you want to bet that there's a coalition war against Mississippi next episode with like 3 affiliated tribes, possible. Rio Grande, and somebody else?
I think we're gonna see a coalition war against the Dene involving Mississippi on the offensive side.
Possibly. I mean, we've certainly seen that the army on the way. Of course, that is always the worry when you're in the early game, especially when you send a big army to attack somebody quite far away. You very often leave your core completely wide open. The AI's not very good at leaving some home to defend.
It is also possible that I shouldn't have sold Rio Grande, and the next episode, Mississippi are going to send their army off to attack the Dene, and Rio Grande is just going to sweep in and take a bunch of cities. But
yeah, I would say of all the ones, despite the fact they're, I believe, they are 5th. I was going to say of all our top 5, they're easily, I think, the most paper. In fact, probably of all the top 10 outside of, alongside maybe the Vandals, they're the most paper of all the powers. They are very impressive and very threatening. But
the Vandals are surprisingly not papery. Their stats are actually they really rebounded quickly in production and military after the war with Spain.
Sorry? Oh, the Vandals.
Yeah. The problem is they don't have any room left to expand.
I think the issue with the Vandals is mostly that They have a very coastal empire, and they're next to a lot of very naval civs. They are
Yeah.
naval themselves, but I could see them losing their capital and the second city to two Sicilies in one episode, for example.
I don't think so. I don't think they can. I don't think their capital's in a great position to be taken by a naval attack until Gallius is, because it's only has two coastal tiles next to it.
It's
Yeah.
true. So yes, North America's very, and we haven't even mentioned the Chinook, who again are our second highest ranked in North America, and
It
are
is
very.
the dark horse of the continent.
They are the dark horse, aren't they? Yeah. Well, the real dark horse is Tongva.
Right. I mean, the Tongva stats aren't necessarily that great, but they do have an impressive city count, and they do have an impressive city settling pattern. So,
I guess if you consider 5 cities an impressive city count, then Tonga.
One of them being an undefendable colony in Mexico.
well,
Yes.
well, more particularly is that their settling pattern to me is important to note. It's
Also, X Rock, who's narrating episode 4, is currently laughing at us, which is great. That's what we want to hear.
That's fantastic. I mean, we never want to be proven
no,
right.
no, watch. X-Rock sitting there like, oh, they're giving hope to 3 affiliated tribes, but they die this episode or something like that.
Well, like if we could predict exactly what was going to happen, I wouldn't watch it, and nobody who read us want to watch the CBR either. It'd be tedious.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think there's been, you know, even the fucking even going to the last episode of CBR X1, for example, the Moors winning was no sure thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
He probably knows something like watch and North America Civ ends up taking a city from Somalia in a peace treaty. You know, just something silly.
I mean, I'm really sad they raised it, but Parg, obviously, they took a city from Manchu in the peace treaty, which was fucking miles away from Parg. Unfortunately, they destroyed it, so it's not going to be an interesting exclave on the map. But,
we don't get our Finland moment this episode. So.
Not yet.
Georgia is trying their best to be Finland without going to war.
Yeah, they actually haven't been to war once yet, Georgia.
Yeah,
Jay was saying earlier.
They're one of like 3 civs that haven't been to war.
Yeah. Pop quiz. Who are the other ones? I can't remember.
Neutrals? I don't know.
Obviously neutrals. Surely neutrals.
I'm not even going to verify. I'm just going to assume that's one of them.
I'm sure Aaron will tell us anyway.
X-Rock confirms that there's a coalition war, but he won't say from.
Yeah, there's a coalition war every episode. So.
Yeah. No, watch. It's like, oh, Kosovo got DOW'd by, Georgia, and, everyone's at war with Georgia or something.
Do we know if the Ptolemies are raising the city they got from Somalia?
If I'm remembering.
Yes, they are, yes.
Yeah, they are. So, sorry, Sarah said Syria, but your hype for Ptolemy Somaliland is going to be short-lived.
Yeah, just a sad thing that we might need to share in case viewers are confused. So there are quite a few spots on the map that we have not seen at all. Hargeisa is one of them. That is due to an error that wasn't caught until very late into recording, where a lot of spots on the map just didn't get caught by the screenshot robot that we have set up. So
yeah, we can't see Hargeisa until there's actual fighting nearby during the turn.
We're never going to see it. It will never be.
Yeah, we're never going to see it because it's gonna be gone. But yeah.
Barring something really funny happening.
I gotta say,
for those who weren't there, is that the screenshots not catching parts of the map. We still have considerably more map coverage per episode than we did in CBR Mark II.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, CBR Mark II, we just had the episode and occasionally a director's cut. I gotta say, as the person who manages the Google map and ergo also the on the infodix the city and population list, the sort of calculations I'm having to do to get the populations for some of the cities we can't see is maniacal. There's a bit of prediction going in there and a bit of estimation of being like, okay, total population is 38.
Your year 8 algebra teacher told you would use this stuff one day.
And we saw that 10 turns ago, so it's probably gone up by about 2 now, so we can put that's estimate 8, which means that's estimated 6, subtract that from that. It's all very fun. And then I see a picture of it in the first slide next episode, and it's like population 100. Anyway, as you say, it's more than we got from Mark II. It's still enough to go off. It's still enough to ability itself, but also has a bit of a mystery. Like one of the big areas we can't really see is the sort of the Kulin Anangu border. And we know Anangu has a bigger army than Kulin right now. Even
But
though
not
Kulin
by
has
much
overall.
anymore.
Sorry?
But not by much anymore.
No, Kulin have much better production, and they have combos, and the Anangu don't. But not being able to see that border means that if a war does break out there, we're still kind of unclear as to actually which way that'll go at the moment. I think in about an episode or two, it's pretty much a given for the Kulin to win it. If
Yeah.
the stats go the same way they're going at the moment.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, it's still the Anangu are bigger, but they just probably won't be able to match what
The
the
Kulin are
able to
bigger in
produce.
virtually every stat except raw military power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think so. I think that's not going to last. I think Anangu don't have the production to sustain war.
According to Cero Said Serio, the word is a silent G, so it's actually pronounced Ananu.
I'm assuming it's probably is it actually just Ananu, or is it more like Anangu?
Anangu.
Anangu.
Anangu. Anangu.
Let us
No,
hope that
if
Cero
there's a
Said
good in
Serio.
there, I think that's wrong. But I think is it doesn't. It seems like it would be spelled. The only reason it's spelled with a G
Yeah,
is it's pronounced Anangu,
so it's a ng sound, as in sing.
but like the
Anangu.
really nasal one or something. Maybe?
Well, I've just got
I
the
don't know.
IPA up, and it's the N with the curl, so it's in.
Yeah.
Although the other one, it's actually that's an N with a flick. What's that? That's like Arnold. That's just an N. That's fine. Yeah, just Anangu.
Anangu.
But don't go too harsh on the G.
So it's a softer G. Got it.
It's I think it's like not there.
Cero Said Serio has also said he can try and send a sound file, and we may learn something new today, which will be exciting.
I do love learning. I actually hate it. I know too much already.
So,
No more facts,
so to be
please.
clear,
No,
we
there's no
have
such-
confirmation that New Netherland has settled the Everglades. Is that right?
Well, yeah, they settled South Florida. Yeah, I put the city dot in Fort Myers. If that means anything to you guys.
Oh, I mean, I check it all the time, but I miss some things sometimes. Also notable in terms of settles that we didn't get to see this episode that happened. Tahiti have settled Pora Pora on New Zealand, the eastern coast of New Zealand.
Tahiti settled Pora Pora right at the bottom of South Island.
Yep.
Not far from Invercargill or Dunedin, in that area.
I made note of it in my Tahiti write-up, if anybody's interested in looking at that.
If anyone wants a full list of turn 90 settles, it's Toronto. Sorry, that's South Island City, Pora Pora, the Florida city. We have another Prague Arctic city, Vladivostok. We have an interesting one, which is actually a Two Sicilies city on Naxos Island, or in the Greek Aegean, Capua.
Boys.
And then, most amusingly of all, the Chola have settled Thiruvarur on the exact same tile that it was on before Punjab raised it. So Thiruvarur is back with a vengeance. Punjab are still at war with the Chola, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. In fact, should we talk about that now? Because that's also on our list. Should we talk about Punjab and the Chola?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm mostly interested in Punjab, really. They've had the biggest rise of the ranks of the Indian civs. And do we think they are like a proper breakout Indian civ? We've never really seen one. The closest we got was Maratha in X Season 1, but they sort of did really well in India and then completely stalled afterwards, whereas Punjab are already making sort of headway into Iran and Persia, Central Asia.
I think Punjab are in a really great position. I put them number 2 in the rankings, and that's where they ended up. Everyone
overall.
basically agreed.
So
I think
in the overall rankings.
Yeah, and I think it was really a lot of that was just like shock and awe, because it was like they, it's really rare to see a civ just wipe the floor so thoroughly with another civ that early in the game when that other civ is not weak. Like Chola was not a weak civ. They were ranked higher than Punjab.
Yeah. Well, Chola were number 2 last episode, I believe.
Chola,
they were number 5.
Chola did have weaker stats than Punjab in the moment, but they had more cities, which is why we ranked them higher than Punjab.
Yeah, Chola was spamming cities, and Punjab just took advantage of that and was like, nah.
Nope, I'm going to take one and raise 3 others.
Yep. It would have been great if Punjab I would have ranked Punjab number 1 if they'd kept all of those.
Oh yeah,
they only kept Nagapatanam, sadly.
Yeah.
Omega Platinum, I think, was the best one. That was the one in Gujarat, which is a nice one. We've had someone join us. Who is it?
It's Shaggy
It's Shaggy
Snorlax.
Snorlax. Hello, Shaggy
A gain
Snorlax.
regardless is a gain. And everybody say hello to our non-administrator power ranker who has joined us, Shaggy Snorlax.
Hello.
It's very pointed to single them out as the non-administrator.
I mean, it's just, you know, to so that people, you know, start to get to know us, who's the bosses and who are the extraneous ones that we can cut in 2 days.
Yeah, who we
I'm
can
kidding.
we can.
I'm the
yeah.
newly minted Stockmeister, though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Shaggy is far from expendable. If you try to expend him, he will tank all. He will just delete all your shares in the stock market.
I
Oh,
own the database.
yeah. I'm very happy that I have almost tripled my starting amount in stonks. I'm glad I held on to my 2 Sicily stonks. So
I'm not taking
CBR
part.
known for strict
Yeah,
hierarchy.
I bought a bunch last part and was happy with it, and I just this part I bought some more because I think 2 Sicilies have a lot of potential.
Oh yeah.
I sold
mean,
all my 2
also, I
Sicilies
know-
this week.
there's a
Power
reason
Rankers-
why I
Power
ranked
Rankers
them
want you-
3rd in part 0, but some of you guys still don't get that.
Well, I think
Right.
seeing what they're doing, I think the power rankers, we love to overrank civs that civs that do like a lot of naval conquests. By the way, the video ended. And
I
do
already
naval
said it.
conquests and like build empires that are on like multiple land masses.
Mhm.
And so I'm like if the 2 Sicilies do that, it doesn't even matter what their stats are. We're gonna rank them high just because like we like it. And so that's why I invested in them.
Right.
See, that's actually why I sold, is because I'm expecting us to sort of correct 2 Sicilies next part, and then I'll buy the dip.
We didn't really push 2 Sicilies that high up though.
No, they were 20. They were like in the 20s somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
They didn't really jump all that much. They had a much more reasonable gain in rank, but I'm still at the end of the day just waiting for that moment to finally say I told you guys that they were a 3rd place civ, and all of you called me crazy.
I don't think there's no way they're gonna make the top 5. In my
They jumped by 14, I should add, which is quite a lot, all things considered.
I want to mention, by the way, Lax, we are now halfway through our bet. If Tahiti still holds Fa'a on the big island of Hawaii, you owe me £5. Or
Honestly, I'm
$5.
beginning to think
$5. It was explicitly
yeah.
dollars.
Yeah,
It was
$5. $5. I misspoke.
I'm beginning to think I have more hope for Tongva fucking taking Fa'a than
No,
Hawaii.
Tahiti are gonna end up in a war with Kulin. They're gonna give it away in a peace treaty.
Yeah, then you're gonna have to give me the $5, dude.
No, that's
The bet was
what are you
that
talking
Tahiti
about?
still holds
No,
it. If they don't hold it, how would you win the bet?
I told you guys that the original bet was that Hawaii does not take Fa'a by the end of episode 6.
we need to check the audio footage. We need to check the audio.
Yeah.
The jury's out on whether that's true or not.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know. Maybe you've checked more recently, but I could have sworn it was just that Tahiti doesn't hold it.
Maybe I did. I don't know.
Well, let's wait till we're at part 6 and see where we are before we get into the
Right, before we get into the specifics of the bet. Regardless, if Hawaii doesn't take it from Tahiti, we already know that that's at least a large portion of the bet fulfilled.
Yes, true. Listen, I want to talk about everyone's favorite continent in every CBR. Every Civ Battle Royale, you hear the fans crying out and asking us, the power rankers, but what about South America? What's happening in South America, though?
It went from like irrelevant to the holder of a winning civilization in Mark II to the part of the continent everybody wished just got erased because Uruguay was insane. And now it's like, why the fuck do they all suck?
It's like genuinely like Mapuche. We've been through this. You have Mapuche in rank 2, Jay.
Right, and I'm going to hold by that.
And they're about 42nd in the stats, and that tells you everything you need to know. Now, I'll get on to who I think is actually shaping up for the top dog in South America, and the answer may surprise you. But we'll start with the Mapuche, because I think the reason we still favour them is twofold. Number one, they do have the most cities, And number two, they were our favourites going into it, so I think there's still a part of that where we're like, well,
I mean, the reason they were our favorites going into it is because they have the most land of any civ in South America, and that's still true. They still have the most room to expand.
And also they've just bullied the hell out of Peru.
They're currently fucking up Peru Bolivia, which helps their case.
I genuinely think I single-handedly could do that.
Yeah,
I think if I was a unit, and I'd probably have like the combat rating of like half of a scout, and I still think I could have fucked up. I think I could have taken Lima at least.
I think the other thing that's keeping me from, allowing me to rank Mapuche high is their unique ability and unique tile improvement, which gives them culture and is also just a claimed tile whenever a Mapuche unit dies on an unworked or pillaged tile.
I hate that goddamn UI.
To me, Mapuche are without a doubt the best contenders for South America, regardless of their stats, and I'm putting them so high, in my opinion, because because right now their current neighbors are probably not the best. Maybe Paraguay, surprisingly.
I invested in Paraguay on the stock market actually because I have a feeling that it's possible. Not like it's totally going to happen, but it's possible that like they just blindside Mapuche and turns out we were all wrong.
Right. Remember when we all ranked Paraguay the lowest of all the South American civilizations? Now look.
Yeah,
Paraguay has been fairly successful so far against Palmares.
Right.
So I'm a little. I think South America this season is a bit of an enigma, in that I still think every civ in South America is still in it, and that does include Peru, Bolivia.
I mean, I disagree with you on that specific.
I mean, Peru, Bolivia does have the most gold of any civilization in the world.
Yeah, I'll just buy their way out of it.
It's going to do them, but
I do think Peru, Bolivia, at the very least, has the ability to capitalize and like third party some kind of war between, I don't know, Paraguay and anybody.
Only the AI actually did that.
It did?
I said if only they would do that.
Oh, I mean, they get coalition later. It's fine. Sometimes that happens.
I thought you meant like pay somebody off to attack somebody else. No.
Oh no, that would be awesome. But like, I'm what I see happening, right, is Paraguay is still sort of like enough of a wild card, and all of the civs in South America are like, dare I say, shitty enough that like any of them can capitalize on Paraguay, or even Grand Colombia if they're going to continue to be this aggressive. Just kind of going to war with somebody and then taking advantage of that in the middle of the continent. So what I did this week for my South America rankings was I kind of just put all of them around like 30, and then just ranked what I thought of South America around sort of the middle part. Because
that's fair, honestly.
You can be better than South America, you can be worse than South America, but like South America is kind of its own ball game right now.
Here's the thing. When it came to Paraguay, we had sort of one lingering prediction, which was that Paraguay always get declared war on by everybody. They're right in the middle of the continent, and having powerful neighbors would mean that they would get partitioned immediately.
Well, I mean, the big reason we thought Paraguay was going to get partitioned immediately is because they denounce every civ as
I understand.
So we figured everyone would just happen. But
however,
they are denouncing everybody as far as I know. But like,
however,
it has not fit them.
The key part of this theory was Paraguay having strong neighbors. Paraguay does not have strong neighbors. The Mapuche, Paraguay are stronger than. The Palmares, Paraguay are currently beating up. Peru, Bolivia, almost out of the question.
Marajoara, then.
No, my prediction is just that I think Paraguay are going to come up top. They have by far.
I totally thought you were going to say, "Oh yeah, Marajoara is going to take South America."
You know what? They would be my second. Paraguay had large production.
I'll just say that.
A decent amount of techs. I think it's Paraguay to lose. I think Paraguay are clearly the front runner at the moment. And while I think Mapuche's strength can definitely grow should they do some more settling, I have noticed one thing putting the maps together with Mapuche, and that is for some reason their population stats are abysmal. Their capital went down in population.
Their capital. That's the thing. Their capital was reliant on sea resources for growth, and when they declared war on Peru, Bolivia sent a bunch of boats down to their capital. It actually not only damaged the city, pillaged any fishing boats
Yeah.
if they made any, and blockaded those tiles, and their capital
makes a lot
starved
more
down to
sense.
4 population.
It's such a
Yeah,
troll.
their capital's miserably low now. But their other cities aren't great either. Penko, which was founded back in episode 2, still only on 3 population. That's inland. Perkenko, that's their second city, population of 6. Kurawera, also a coastal city, but on the Atlantic Ocean, found in episode 2, population 4. They only have one large city at 10, which is Kozkoz, which is over in the kind of the Parana, the Parana Delta area. And I think that's a big worry for me. That you can't get a good production, you can't get good science with population stats that low.
Yeah, it's definitely
And
true. That's my big worry about them as well.
they're not going to get much bigger cities further south. The further south, the more tundra you get.
Actually,
so
no,
I
I
think,
mean, there's plains down a decent way down there,
Yeah,
and they're pretty fertile if they settle them.
I think at the moment Uruguay just have
Paraguay.
they still have like land to
Paraguay.
settle Uruguay. They have
Oh
not run
god,
out of-
Uruguay's back!
Sorry,
Uruguay
Paraguay.
has hacked into
They
the
still have land
game.
to settle. It's still fertile. And more to the point, their cities are beefy. Their stats are much better. I think this is and they've already bullied Palmares. I think this is Paraguay's game now. I think they're the ones to watch. But
Game's
Marajoara
a bit strong. We'll go with region for now.
I will say, I know we're about 91 days to Montego Bay, but speaking of, just South America, do we want to make comment on...
Damn them all.
Oh yeah, do you like my
So
little
is
sea
Jamaica
shanty
a
reference?
South American civ?
Yeah, are we still considering Jamaica a South American civ after this huge loss of
Oh,
Spanish
yeah, they have a
Town?
city in South America.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I mean,
They de
it's
facto
just how do you think we overhyped Jamaica after it settled 4 cities in episode 1?
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, 100%.
I
They
think
have
Well, I mean,
As
here's
is
the thing.
tradition.
no sense except to lose a city.
The thing is, the one thing we said about Jamaica that was the reason we were ranking them so low in part 0 was that they just don't found cities. They come out part 1 and found 4 cities, including the capital, which is the second highest after Burkina Faso.
right.
And we went, okay, well Jamaica have obviously rolled a great city settling bias. That's their main problem. Rank them high, especially given that Gran Colombia and the Olmecs had only found 2 at that point.
Right.
Well, they've just then not founded a single city since. Do they even have any settlers out? I don't think they do.
No, I don't think they do.
So
we can see.
So
we
it
can
seems
see.
like they are definitely going to struggle going forward, but I do think of all the cities Gran Colombia could have taken, Spanish Town was probably one of the best. I think that's not really.
It's probably the only city near them that they could have taken.
Aside from
If they're 2
Montego Bay.
options, yes, I guess it was a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're both great options. I just wanted to mention that it seems that Gran Colombia might be going on an upwards trend. By part 1, Gran Colombia had settled 1 city, not 2.
Yes.
So, anywho,
Gran Colombia are on 4 cities now.
yeah,
The
which is
Mapuche
far
are on,
stronger than what they started on.
6 cities, and Peru, Bolivia are on 2. Every other South American civ, apart from Jamaica, is on 4 cities now.
Yeah.
So Paraguay, Palmares, Marajoara, and Gran Colombia.
I think you forgot
at
Peru,
this point,
Bolivia
their
exists
stats are a lot
again.
lower though. Their production stats are abysmal. But otherwise, at this point, they're essentially just another South American civ. And they do have a somewhat of an advantage, which is that Marajoara, Palmares, Paraguay, they've sort of settled into each other a bit. Gran Colombia are actually a little bit further away from all those other civs, and they have the Amazon rainforest in the way. So I don't think they're really under threat of being invaded anytime soon. They've got a chance to grow yet, and a chance to essentially catch up with everybody else. But they're certainly not out of it. No.
Aaron shares that Gran Colombia lost their starting settler to a Paraguay scout.
Yeah,
They didn't.
they did.
That's a damn classy move.
And the funny thing is, Gran Colombia was the one that declared the war, so who's stupid?
Yeah.
It's Simone.
Just wait till they make peace and Gran Colombia gives away fucking Caracas or something.
They give
They
away
give away
Spanish Town.
That's it. Can I also add, by the way, because I only noticed this when I was looking through these slides when I was reading the power rankings earlier, which is that Mapuche are at war with Gran Colombia, Marajoara, Peru, Bolivia, and Palmares. So every civ other than Paraguay on the continent, they are at war with.
And Jamaica.
And we call Paraguay the warmongers, but like
Right.
Jesus Christ.
I don't think Paraguay has actually declared a single war, have they? They've always been targets.
Paraguay don't need to. Paraguay are only at war with Gran Colombia now. So like they're actually, we call Paraguay these sort of the ones who are always in the middle of the wars, but at the moment Mapuche are just being so hostile. They're just throwing them out.
Probably, presumably, they were the target in a bunch of those wars. They didn't declare them all themselves.
Possibly, I don't have that info. I'm sure Aaron does.
I think where Mapuche screwed up the most was by raising Lima, because Lima was not a bad city. It was quite a good city.
Yeah, they should have kept that. But
a lot of tiles.
Yeah, Peru Bolivia was spending that gold.
Yeah, that good old gold. I'm amused they have more gold than the Vandals, even though the Vandals have 12 trade routes.
Right, so that's another... So there are quite a few things that we have learned over the past episode. And we will mention some things regarding Blue Cassette at the end of this episode of the PRCast, but what we should mention is that quite a few mods that were promised to be implemented, whether through accident or not, were not actually implemented, one of which was a mod that prevented civilizations from raising cities if their happiness was positive by the time they captured the city. So,
or I mean, it would allow them it would allow them to stop raising the city if their happiness went above 0 after they started raising it, which is the thing they previously couldn't do. But yeah, that mod's not in there. So it's exactly the same raising situation as CBRX 1.
Right. So that situation has not changed, but on top of that, where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, I was just mentioning that mod was not implemented. And the bug with the Vandals. So the Vandals, unlike every civilization, have 12 trade routes. That's, what is that, 4 times more than the second place civilization in terms of trade routes?
Yeah,
So everyone else has 2. Germany briefly had 3 for one turn somehow, but
I mean, trade routes. Trade routes aren't really a thing you can have 12 off at this stage in the game. There's not any possible way to do that. Trade routes in Civ 5 are unlocked through technologies, and there's another way they can't. I've been playing too much Civ 6, and you need to build harbors, but no, that's lighthouses, but Civ 6.
Regardless, the Vandals have way more trade routes than any other civilization, which may be allowing their growth to grow to.
So right now they're using it to get gold, because they have the highest gold per turn of any civ, net gold per turn, by quite a wide margin. So it's clear what they're using those trade routes for, and which, I mean, obviously if you were a human player and you got 12 free trade routes, it'd be like, god damn, pump up the population in your cities. But this is an civ AI we're talking about, so that no, they're not doing that.
Right. So it may be a buff to them overall, but they have not used it to their fullest advantage, and from what we are told, it's not necessarily going to impact the game in any significant way. So.
I mean, they told. I will say, Blue Cassette told us that about the Iroquois, and then the Iroquois, about the Iroquois getting a autocracy ideology in the fucking classical era somehow, and they were like, yeah, it doesn't impact it that much. And then the Iroquois went on to be, one of the predominant powers of the world. So we don't necessarily know that to be the truth.
I mean,
but also correlation does not necessarily imply causation.
No, we don't know. We'll never know. Yeah. But on the other hand, what I will say is, we know the AI does shit all with money, with gold. Essentially, it doesn't know how to.
This bug is clearly gold. This bug is clearly less serious than the Iroquois bug last season. I'll just put it that way.
Right. If you want a civilization that makes a lot of gold that uses it, well, vote for Qatar in the next Civilization Battle Royale voting cycle. I'm kidding. Well, I would actually prefer if you guys voted for Yemen under Arwa al-Salahi. Or Salahi. Fuck. I actually don't know how her last name is spelled in Arabic, so I can't actually.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna go for Yemen next time.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome civilization for the Middle East. Anywho, speaking of the Middle East.
Speaking of which.
Hey, Jazz.
Hey,
yes,
Jazz.
How's Jazz doing?
Jazz is an enigma because they are settling a ton of cities and their stats are so bad.
Well, yeah, they're settling the desert and only the desert, and they have the worst possible placements.
I mean, they are settling plains. Let's be fair.
There are some plains in there.
They're not settling the middle of the Arab desert. They're making essentially
yeah, they're going around the edges.
Iran, they've settled Oman, they've settled southern Mesopotamia. in a region that is essentially mostly flat desert, they've actually settled as well as I think they can do.
Right.
It's just it is a bad starting region.
They are in a difficult situation because unlike all the other, well, like a lot of other civilizations, in the one instance where gold actually matters is if you have none of it. If you have no gold, your production goes down, your units suffer attrition, and your science stops growing.
I would say your units don't actually suffer attrition if you have negative gold because I play Civ 5 a lot and I have negative gold a lot and it definitely doesn't affect my units. I don't think it affects production either.
I think it affects combat strength actually, doesn't it?
No, that's the no, that's what I just said. It doesn't affect.
Doesn't it? Do units disband or is that Civ 4?
Yeah, it will disband your units after a certain number of turns.
There are a lot of things the game says are true that aren't actually true. Anywho,
Yeah.
So
It's a complicated game.
It's a complicated game. So anywho, regardless, science-wise, that's where the economy actually matters, from what I'm understanding. And Hijaz, due to the fact that they did not due to the fact that they were running out of gold, their science, which is already a very poor stat of theirs, is going to be one of the worst in the game so far, by far. And
that is why I sold my Hijaz.
They are likely to
would
stagnate
say,
because of that.
But respond to a couple people in the chat. I think that's MRN2 Electric Blue. I forget who that is, but says I think it only disbands player units. Someone actually checked this last season and found it will disband AI units too. It's just hard to notice. Xrock says I've never had a unit disband from negative gold. In my recent game, I ran -30 GPT for like 200 turns. Well, I mean, lucky you, I guess. But I've had situations where I went to like -20 for 2 turns and it started disbanding my units. So.
I mean, I play peaceful.
But I mean, maybe Xrock, maybe you didn't have zero. Maybe you didn't have 0 gold in your treasury. It only starts disbanding if you have a lot of over -5 gold per turn and your treasury is at 0, and it continues like that for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you have just certain large amounts of units. Yeah, no, that does make actual sense though.
It's possible.
The negative treasury.
I think what's interesting about the Middle East in general is we went into it in part 0 with quite a fairly unified idea on how it would look. Kurdistan would be the top dogs, Jerusalem would be the punching bags and go down quickly, and Hejaz would be boring. And that's not panned out at all so far. Kurdistan themselves have lost the city to Uzbekistan and not been impressive at all.
It was granted a far-flung city, and it was a poor settle, in my opinion.
Yeah, true. Jerusalem have not been particularly impressive, but also they've not been awful.
But also, I think Jerusalem's doing about as poorly as we expected them to at this point.
Yes, perhaps. When Hejaz, on the other hand, have gone on quite a settling spree. They actually have 8 cities down now, which is significantly more than any other civ in the region outside of the Ptolemies, if you count the Ptolemies as a Middle Eastern civ. The Ptolemies actually have. The Ptolemies technically have 8 cities, but one of those is the Somali city that they're currently raising. So, de facto 7 cities. I'm kind of interested as to where people see this going. Having a weak Kurdistan makes this kind of more interesting because it actually gives Hejaz an expansion opportunity, but it also gives Punjab an expansion opportunity into the Middle East very early. And I feel like either of those 2 options could have really big ramifications on kind of the future of this region, which is obviously a very important region, a very difficult region to hold historically throughout the CBR. On the one hand, Hejaz capturing Kurdistan will really put them into like a regional power sort of area, and that better land of Mesopotamia and whatnot.
I don't think Hejaz is actually going to amount to anything because their food and production are just so bad, and their science is about to be so bad that they're just going to get left behind. It doesn't matter. They're settling a lot of cities that other civs are going to capture from them.
Maybe, but a lot of those new cities are quite new. Remember, they're not developed yet.
Yeah, but also, you have to consider that, like, in 2 turns, I'm pretty sure it is, if Hejaz does not significantly increase their gold per turn, they're going to have no science because their treasury is going to run out, and they're currently losing more money than they're producing beakers.
Yeah, it is true.
If that persists for any length of time, they're fucked.
Okay, well, what would Punjab invading Kurdistan look like? Because that's very feasible. Punjab now have two cities very close, right in the middle of Iran, very close to the Kurdistan border.
The terrain there
Um,
is so tough. I don't know if they'd be able to do it.
yeah, it's potential. I mean, we've seen cities in Iran fall earlier than the era of planes before, for example.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's completely unfeasible. But you're right. Maybe a full evisceration would be quite difficult from this angle. Um,
To me, like Aaron had shared, is that Hijaz are much weaker than Palmyra was in CBRX, and Palmyra ended up rolling over and dying near the end. I do still think Palmyra did incredibly well given its circumstances, but based on what we're seeing, despite Hijaz settling a lot of cities, um, uh, is that sorry, I'm reading ECH, just confirming that I was right about the bet, by the way.
Yep, you
Um,
were.
so, anywho,
If anyone other than Hawaii doesn't take it, or if anyone
uh,
other than Hawaii takes it, JMAn still wins the bet.
right. So, anywho, this will not be an exciting region, in my opinion. I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's competitive at some point. I hope Hijaz somehow recover to a point where they can actually compete with Kurdistan and Jerusalem, and maybe there can be some kind of dominant power there. But right now, I'm just not seeing it. I wasn't seeing it at the beginning on episode 0. I ranked Kurdistan relatively high compared to some other civs because I said, well, they're militaristic, so we'll see what happens. But
you have a pivot
as
point.
a Middle Eastern historian, I'm just saddened to see that once again, it seems like the Middle
Hmm.
East is going to struggle, unless you count the Ptolemies as a Middle Eastern civ, which you very well could. In which case, well, it could be exciting outside of the
I
Middle
guess they're,
East.
they're geographically Middle Eastern, but obviously not culturally.
Well, I mean,
Um,
yeah, exactly, sure.
um, I will say Palmyra didn't live up completely to their potential. There was this long period in the mid game where Palmyra could have um could have taken on some targets that they could definitely have taken on instead just sat tight with a big army not doing anything. I remember that well because I was supporting Palmyra and I was begging them basically to declare war on some of the neighboring cities.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I agree that overall he did do well for a civ in that region certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well let's move on to our last topic that I've written down, which is sort of shooting over Asia a bit. Let's talk about the two I've termed the two lame tigers, in sort of a reference to the sort of the tigers of Asia. And these are of course Laos and Vietnam, two cities that we sort of hyped up as being big rivals, and that has certainly been the case so far. But unfortunately, that seems to have completely stunted both of them.
They're a wet
With
noodle.
neither civ looking very impressive at all at the moment.
I
So I
mean,
sort of want to talk about who benefits here. Obviously Malika, but who else perhaps benefits here? And do we think either of these civs have any kind of comeback opportunity?
I think
I
Laos definitely doesn't. Um,
Yeah, Laos are down to 2Cs now, which is
Vietnam,
pretty.
I could theoretically see it. I think so. The one interesting thing about Vietnam is that I said a few episodes back that they were just gonna in before they settled the actual borders of real life Vietnam and
which they have now
Yeah.
done.
they're actually doing that currently. They're just expanding south along the coast. Um,
Yes, unfortunately, Malika have a city in South Vietnam already, but so they would have to capture that.
yeah,
I would argue that Vietnam still has the potential to settle an area like the Philippines, whereas Laos is kind of just a wet noodle. And even though the city that Malacca had taken is being raised and they could resettle that spot, it's kind of too little too late, considering
yeah,
how small they are. Because, yes, they seem to be the more militaristic of the pair of paper tigers, or wet noodles, I'll call them. Um, but they're struggling more because they are surrounded by a remarkably impressive Bhutan, who has yet to take a city, thank God. They are surrounded by Taiping, they are surrounded by Malacca, and of all things that, you might want to raise your eyebrow at who they're surrounded by the Dutch East Indies. you know, it's very difficult when you call that a potential threat. You know, you are definitely in a sore spot when that civilization could be a threat to you.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
I think you're right about Vietnam starting the Philippines. I mean, one of the interesting things early on was Malacca really quickly settled North Sumatra, really quickly settled Borneo entirely, and they've since then turned all their interests seemingly to mainland Asia, which leaves a big part of Indonesia and the Philippines because fucking VOC aren't settling it. A big part of Indonesia and the Philippines completely open at the moment. I mean, if I had to pick a civ to settle the Philippines right now, I'd probably pick Taiping. But certainly it's open to Vietnam
No, I
too.
think
I think
Taiping is kind of allergic to settling.
Right.
that's not true.
Thinking-
Taiping have settled 5 cities so far.
But their number of cities they're settling is completely disproportionate to the huge amount of space that they have. So I don't know.
It is
It
true,
might
it's
be a
true.
while before they get to the Philippines, if ever.
I mean,
It's true. I mean, the
I-
thing is,
I-
they're on 5 cities. So are Bhutan. So are Yuan. They have more than the Manchu. They have the same amount as Japan. So they're actually for the region. Taiping have a.
They're about
very-
average. But the thing is, I mean, everyone in that region is being slow to settle, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd agree.
I,
And they're kind of lucky that the fast settling civs like Punjab and Parg, who are nearby, have gone in completely opposite direction.
Yeah.
So they've still got tons of space.
And Malacca.
And Malacca, yeah. So, but I guess the demise of Laos and perhaps Vietnam. I think one civ who really interestingly will benefit this is Bhutan, who not only could take some cities there, but it also leaves them essentially with what I would like to call a non-front. So as long as Vietnam and Laos sort of stay there, they don't have to worry about Malacca. They don't have to worry about VOC potentially in the future. So that southern eastern front suddenly becomes a lot more secure. Obviously, Taiping are still there, and they did just settle a city in the Sichuan Basin, Galapu, which is quite vulnerable to Taiping. But their core certainly is now mostly protected on that front. And given Punjab are a very scary rival indeed, sitting on the western front, I think it could be quite useful to them to only have one front to worry about. And also, still feel free to settle the north, which is, as we've just proudly said, at the moment, that bit of China is just completely unsettled at the moment. So I think, even though they've been fairly quiet so far, Bhutan have a sort of interesting future ahead of them because,
Like
like
Bhutan, every episode, Bhutan just creeps up the rankings a little bit higher just because, they're just slowly carving out for themselves like a decent position.
not to mention that
Yeah.
they do have
Which
quite
is
the
kind of what we
carpet of
expected
units.
Bhutan to do from the very beginning.
Oh,
Yes, well,
come
everyone
on!
is
Don't
running
tell
away
me you
from them.
expected Bhutan of all civs to creep up. I mean,
No, no, that's not. I'm not talking about creeping up the rankings. I'm saying carving out for themselves like a secure position that they can defend for a long time. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say that what is really driving up Bhutan's rank is the fact that they do have quite the carpet. You know, they have quite a few military units, a lot of which are Dapons, to be fair, and
which
Dapons
they're
can
pretty good.
Dapons are good unless they're only supplemented by more Dapons. Like Dapons on their own, they're quite flimsy, but given the presence of, say, a composite bowman or any other future ranged unit, those Dapons are going to be extremely important for Bhutan's future. It just really depends on how long are they going to hold on to the ones that they currently have, and are they really going to capitalize on any of their neighbors that could be considered weak at the moment. And considering Bhutan's peaceful nature, despite being in a war with Chola earlier on in this season, that's a little bit more questionable.
Yeah. I mean, the Chola War, fortunately didn't go anywhere either way. But yeah, I mean, we didn't expect Bhutan to be a particularly warmongery civ. If they can just settle well now and defend and have enough army to defend, they don't need to declare wars yet. Is the truth. They've got so much space to settle, so much decent land to settle as well, with Taiping settling quite slowly and Laos and Vietnam not coming too much. That at the moment, they don't need to be aggressive. In a way, it's almost advantageous to not be because they'll rack up less warmongering penalties and whatnot. And they're not going to take cities from Chola or Punjab yet, anyway.
So, a topic that, Lax, that you didn't write down, but something that you mentioned during our pre-recording was You think that central the central part of China and parts of Mongolia and Central Asia and whatnot
Mm.
are going to be really important going forward because so far they remain widely unsettled.
Well, it's kind of hard to say how important they'll be because how important they'll be almost comes down to what Civ settle it. Now, the clearest analog to a really empty space that we have in CBR history is all the way back in Mark 1, where we didn't have Yakutia, we didn't have Sibir yet. The only really big Civ up in northern Siberia was Mongolia. And Mongolia were, as Mongolia often are, unfortunately, quite quiet. So as a result, because the map was more, let's say, Mercator projection-esque than the current one is, there was loads of empty space up in North Russia, and it ended up being settled by a lot of the Chinese civs, a lot of the Asian civs, a very random, almost patchwork of cities up there. Now that didn't come to much, partially because the game ended quite early, obviously. I think also because that land was so tundra-esque and far away from all these civs, they couldn't really actually build much of an army there. So any wars there kind of fell flat. Well, that's not the same with Central China. Central China obviously is somewhat dominated by the Big Tarim Desert, which isn't the best land. But actually, the area that's currently completely empty includes vast parts of Kazakhstan plains, the area around the Urumqi, that area, which is quite nice land, and also Tibet, of course, which is really mountainous, really hilly, and is known for being a really useful land to hold for defensive purposes. Now, depending on which civs actually make good on this land, I think
Georgia.
that could provide well, Georgia's an option, isn't it? I think it could provide a really interesting outlook for the future game. We have seen civs use exclaves to launch huge wars in the late game. Most famously, Mark II, Finland's conquering of India, for example. And I think, especially because a lot of this land is not bad land and defensible because of the mountains, I don't think it's unfeasible. We could see some proper proxy wars and some proper big international wars taking place between civs. You'd never dream of having proper land conflicts happening in that area. But it does depend on who settles it. It could be that it goes completely vacant until eventually Northern Yuan and Punjab and Bhutan finally get to settling it. It's possible. But it could also be that these civs who are stuck without anywhere to settle, civs like Georgia, Kurdistan perhaps, Perm perhaps, Kosovo possibly in the future, civs that are nearby, or maybe even Laos, civs that are nearby with settlers free, they'll just find their way into that big space eventually and they'll do what settlers do, just pop a city down.
Oh god,
And we've seen that happen before. I mean, again, most iconically, the most iconic distant settle would probably be the Tibetan settlement of Ukraine, all the way back in Mark II, which was slightly different circumstances. There just happened to be a settler nearby when a city got nuked off the map, so they just quickly hopped in there and pumped it down. They didn't keep it for long, obviously.
It was taken by Sibir.
But yeah, and again, the difference between that having the patchwork be in Siberia is it's so out of the way that you capture a city up there, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to lead to anything else. That's not the case in Central China, and we could definitely see one civ with a big standing there who do commit a few settlers there, actually forge out almost a second little core right in Central Asia. And as I say, I really hope it is Georgia because that's who I want it to be at this point. I want Georgia to have 4 cores.
I love
and it's feasible. It's possible. So yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it's certainly going to be somewhere to watch in the coming episodes. And the first ones to sort of plonk exclaves down there are going to have a real advantage as well because those cities are going to grow a lot quicker, a lot earlier, obviously. So keep your eyes peeled on that area. It could turn out to be very, very interesting indeed.
I would argue that Georgia's core in Nenetsya isn't really a core, considering that one of the 2 cities there still only has 1 population.
In Nenetsya.
Yeah.
Oh, it's in Archangel, but yeah.
Yeah, it's not in Nenetsya, but it's nearby. Yeah.
I mean, technically, it's not far from is it Yamalin-Nenets, the big long one? But yeah, it's not where Nenets were in Civ 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in CBRX 1. Yeah.
It's. I agree. It's not. It's unlikely to be a core just because the land there is quite bad.
Yeah, it's just so shit. Yeah. I actually don't think the Kazakhstan settles are bad. I think they're quite interesting.
Yeah,
especially because
they
that
can
land
certainly
is
be connected to the main core and not too.
Yeah, they have 2 Caspian ports, and also, Yeah, so they're only really bordering Uzbekistan there, who are powerful civ certainly, but also have lots of other neighbours and lots of other avenues for getting on with as well. So I think there's a strong possibility that they could actually build something decent there. I think given how few places Georgia have to settle, I think that makes more sense than trying to settle right up close to the USSR again. Or
The only thing I want is for Georgia to either start knocking out Great Perm or the USSR or both. It'll just be so much fun.
well, they're not going to do the USSR yet, obviously. They're miles behind, and they're kind of too far away from Perm at the moment. Other than those big northern cities, which again I wouldn't really count. And they're kind of too far away from Perm to do any real damage.
Right.
Kurdistan plausible, Jerusalem plausible. They definitely have enemies they could take on.
Sarah said, Serio asked, what do we think about Hawaiian Papua? Since we already mentioned Tahitian New Zealand, I guess we could talk a little bit more about that. But first, let's talk about Hilo.
It's a great move. It heralds the impending Hawaiian invasion of Australia.
It's actually not a bad move. I mean, no one expects anything of Hawaii. There are civ who we're hoping at least will be entertaining to watch, rather than putting any stock in them doing well. But you know, a lot of the big problem with these Polynesian civs is they end up with a lot of high food, low prod cities over in the Pacific. So getting an early settlement on a bigger, meatier, hillier island, and one that is obviously close to the rest of Indonesia, it's an interesting early move, especially given not civs have, no civs have actually touched the Indonesian islands east of Borneo yet. So if they could plop a few more down there, it's really interesting. If it's the only one they found there, then yeah, it's just waiting to be conquered, really. Probably by one of the Australian civs or Malacca, or even maybe Vok if they get their act together a bit more. But I'd love to see a fully Hawaiian New Guinea, or like a little Hawaiian empire here. Again, I don't want you to twist my words and be like, oh, that's going to be Hawaii's path to victory. I think it'll be amusing and pretty to look at and fun to spot on maps. But
it could lead them to settling on Australia, or maybe settling in a different direction. If they're lucky.
Kulin have too many cities down now for Hawaii to make any impact on Australia at this point.
That's a fair point. Barring something like, well, actually, Tahiti could make a bigger impact on Australia than Hawaii could, if we're being honest. But yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think of all the places that they could settle, yes, it makes sense as an AI to settle a city where Hilo is settled in Papua New Guinea because it's a bigger island. But I think they're called the Chamorros Island chain. That was probably more acceptable or more expected of them, and probably would have been better of them, just so that they have a more consistent core. And instead they've settled a very far-flung city, which at the same time is something that I said was a strength of Tahiti, but and I still hold by that, but still they need to start knitting the gaps, if that makes sense.
Just to specify for people, the Chamorro Island chain is also called the Mariana Islands, and they're the islands that sort of include Guam. And if you go further north, it turns into like Iwo Jima, or those Japanese Pacific islands that are further west, but like north of New Guinea, south of Japan.
If Hawaii settles those to connect to their Papua colony, that'd be pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, again, yeah, it'll be interesting. I'd also love to see Hawaii settle Philippines as well, which is really not off the cards at this point.
Oh man, but if it happens, then Asia's on the table.
Yeah. And then Hawaii just wins the game at that point.
No, if that happens, then Hawaii shoots number 1 contender because they're going to have
my thousands of Hawaii
shares. It's a well-known fact that whoever holds Philippines first in CBI does really well.
Hawaii wins the game, but never takes Fa.
We end on the stalemate at the end of the game with Fa untouched.
Just so that I can make my $10.
No, I keep having to pay you like fucking $5 every single
I wouldn't do that
6 episodes that go past.
Unless you wanted to like push your luck.
But then if Hawaii ever takes it, then JMAn has to pay it all back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
It's gone. Plus, I give you a further interest. $5 on top of that.
Yeah.
So the other half of the question, because we did mention it, but we didn't actually talk about it all that much. What do we think about Tahitian New Zealand being settled on the eastern coast of the South Island, right next to the tip?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people. I think a lot of people are like, oh, this could be a big staging point for Tahiti invading the Kulin or whatever. I mean,
Tahiti's not gonna do shit with it.
I don't think that this is a big invasion point for them. For me, what I wrote in my write up was that of all the cities spots on New Zealand they could settle, this was probably one of the better ones because there's 2 mountains in the way from a land invasion if Kulin decides to come in. They are also on the east coast, so naval invasion would be difficult. And at the same time, it gives Tahiti an opportunity to actually start settling on something that's a little bit more substantial than tiny little islands all across the Pacific.
I mean, yeah, I think I have very similar feelings as I do with Papua. It's an interesting settle. I mean, the difference is you can't really get anywhere from New Zealand. You settle New Zealand and then you've got to find another avenue. But luckily, Tahiti's UA is all about that.
Yeah.
Whereas, New Guinea sort of leads into other territories, which I think are quite interesting.
Yeah, of course, it's probably worth noting that Tahiti, I'm sure, did not intend to set out intending to settle New Zealand. Their settler just ended up there.
Obviously.
Yeah.
He didn't just settle an Antarctic, a little Antarctic base, to be honest.
Their AI just got all scrambled because they're like, I thought my settler was over by, Tonga. Why is it here now?
What's interesting is if they then send a settler west, could it theoretically land in like Madagascar?
If they sent a settler into the Indian Ocean, yeah.
Well, that could happen.
Way
I
to
think
cuck
it's not
Zanzibar.
likely.
So if that happens, that'd be great. I mean, there's also the main bit of Australia that hasn't yet been settled is Tasmania and also the area around Perth, that southwest Australia bit.
Right.
And it's pretty feasible now that Tahiti could zoom a settler over there again, probably accidentally. But again, I mean, it's still fodder for the Australians. So it's really without there being a real strong base there like there was with CBRX New Zealand. I don't see it turning into much more substantial other than nice colours on the map. And it is a nice colour. I like the Tahiti colours a lot.
Yeah, I think given Tahiti's settling pattern, I think they're really only gonna get the tip of New Zealand.
I mean, it could be possible that they just don't embark their settler first thing if they build one on New Zealand. So
yeah, I mean, they could maybe get a second one on New Zealand, but that's about all I'm seeing, right? That's not there's not much else they're gonna get there. Like, and especially if like Kulin or someone just wants to come in and be like, "Hi, this is mine."
Well, like one of the something we've never seen in CBRX is a peacefully divided New Zealand. New Zealand's only ever been settled by one nation throughout all its history, whether it was the Maori or New Zealand themselves.
Haven't we also always had civs that started on New Zealand?
Yes.
Yeah.
Up until
so I guess there you go.
This
we didn't
season,
in CBRX 1, but yes.
CBRX 1 had sit-ons in New Zealand, and
I we did. Oh no, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think
that was
Mark
that
II
was a
Maori.
time.
Did Mark 1 also have the Maori? Yeah, they did, didn't it?
Yes, I
Yes, we
mean,
had Maori both
I'm
times,
interested
I
to see
believe.
what a completely like unsettled, no one starting on New Zealand does to I guess the eastern side of Oceania.
It could very feasibly be a Kulin Tahiti split.
Possibly.
That'd be cool, actually.
It could be.
Yeah,
it could be a fun way of looking at things. I will say, as someone who worked on the dev team, albeit not at the level of some people working on voting regions, it was a really weird realization going, maybe we shouldn't have a voting region devoted to an area that only has 2 civilizations. So we had to go, well, let's throw them into the South Pacific vote. And I'm pretty glad we did that. I think that
one of the things I was actually saying to Jay before the podcast started is I think, especially in very future CBRXs, just to keep things more fresh and whatnot, I think we're going to have to move away from this idea that every region must have average 1 civ in this region, and that's the only way the game will possibly be balanced and fair. Well, I think actually there's something quite interesting about having crowded regions, less crowded regions, big empty spaces like in China, which can be sort of colonized by anyone. I mean, I think one of the strongest parts of CBRX 1's sort of map layout, for example, was the whole idea of having 2 Australias actually start right next to each other. It meant that Australia, right from the off, was a much more interesting continent where you had lots of wars going on early, but also Australia being stifled by the Murray, which meant Papua and New Zealand could take control early. Obviously, in the end, Australia did end up getting it all anyway, but it made it so much more fascinating early on, and it wouldn't have happened if we'd just gone, no, we must have one in the east and one in the west to keep it perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
There's
So I
a
think
lot of things to take into consideration.
So
I think that
certainly, it's quite likely that that when we make another next Civ Battle Royale, without BC and all that, it'll probably be on a smaller map, and that means probably the way that we do voting regions is going to be totally different.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
We might go back
Next
to
year, actually,
one
gonna
of
be a
my
ground-
preferred methods, which is some regions are pick 2 regions, specifically the
Yeah,
Pacific.
absolutely, that's going to happen.
We might get
Cloud
Gullah.
is pissed because we got into so many arguments. I was like, you need to make the Pacific a pick 2. It doesn't matter. It needs to be this way. And you're like, no, you're an
But
idiot.
no, we can make it pick 1, the same as everything else. Why do we have one pick 2 region and everything else is pick
I
1?
recommended 3 pick 2 regions overall, to be fair.
I think just to go to what Shaggy was saying, Gullah are never going to get in because they're just in too popular a region.
Yeah.
Alas. As much as I would like to see Gullah get in before the leader of Gullah actually dies.
Oh my god, yeah,
The
that
leader,
would be awesome.
leader of Gullah, I should specify, is one of the very few Civ 5 mod leaders, who is still alive.
And I've met her,
And you've met her, haven't you? Yeah, I
and
remember you
she's
saying.
awesome.
Yeah, exactly. No, we should hype that up. The fact that 1, she's alive and could theoretically read the CBR, and 2, JMAn has met her.
Shaggy,
No,
Shaggy's met
Shaggy.
her.
Or Shaggy,
I have
Shaggy has met her. And so yeah, that's this right there. That's a perfectly good reason to vote for Gola next time.
I was
that
pushing. I
dangerous
was pushing
precedent.
for Gullah. Everyone was like, "Look at these colors. Look at why are these colors so weird? Why are these colors pink and brown
Damn,
and
man, their
weird?"
colors are a plus.
I know.
Yeah,
I
I
love the
feel
colors.
great. It just set a dangerous
Imagine
precedent
seeing
where
down
it's
the
like,
map.
vote for me. I lead the Yorkshire Civ. Lacsirax Ariscal. You all
Yeah.
know me. Vote for me. But yeah.
I was gonna say I want to see Gola colors on the map because it's you see those colors and you just grow an extra arm instantly.
Radioactive colors.
Yeah.
I do want to share for reference, by the way, that one of our community members, Sero said Serio, actually made a map. He's actually in the chat right now. There are he mentioned it. There are 33 living civ leaders or civilizations that were made when people were still alive. So, for example, Kim Jong-un's North Korea. There is
No, he's dead.
well, oh yeah, he had 32
Yeah, is he
heart
alive? Is he
transplants.
dead?
There's a good few British Civs. There's Cameron. There's Queen Elizabeth II.
There's Chaz under what's his name? Simone something.
Chaz?
Does that count? The Chaz?
Yeah,
Is that
well, I
what
mean,
it
it's
is?
Yeah,
like a
Capitol Hill
click
Autonomous
button,
Zone.
So
I've
Sval,
never heard of that.
even though
It's
it hasn't been.
autonomous region in what was it, Seattle or Portland or something?
Yeah,
It was during the BLM protests last summer. It was this zone of 6 square blocks in downtown Seattle that was taken over by protesters, and they were gonna run it as a cop-free zone, but
right.
eventually it fell apart.
It was technically quote unquote autonomous, and they had a de facto leader named Raz Simone. It's very
He declared
interesting.
himself leader, but a lot of people didn't recognize his
Are they therefore CBR eligible if they were functionally
they
autonomous?
No,
are.
they're not.
I would
Because-
argue that they are eligible.
I would argue they aren't because well, for one, it was a quote cop-free zone unquote until somebody got murdered and then they let in cops.
Well, actually, no, that's
So
not
it's
what
like-
happened
it's like,
either.
okay.
When the police had attempted to enter the autonomous zone after there were 2 murders, and actually the people of Capitol Hill stonewalled them and prevented them from entering. And it wasn't
I thought
until
they
it was
eventually
made
got in.
abundantly clear that since the bodies were left and they were tampered with so extensively that those murderers would go off scot-free even if they were found because the evidence had been tampered with so heavily, that that's when the people living there decide, okay, well, we just fundamentally damaged some people's lives, and that's when they shut down. It also was due to the food crisis they were having. But again, I would argue, based on the circumstances, since they were, even though they weren't legally recognized, since they acted autonomously from the rest of the continental United States and the state government of Washington and the city government of Seattle, that they should be allowed. But I also make arguments about this shit all the time. Also notable is text key Robert Mugabe, Zimbabwe is eligible.
Text key Robert Mugabe is a shoe-in, or text key leader Mugabe is a shoe-in for the next Battle Royale.
Text key CBRX.
There's also Eastern Germany.
Leaders that are alive.
Text key Royale season 2 or
Exactly.
season 3.
Germany and Merkel.
Leaders that are
Putin's
alive.
Russia, the Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. The Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan civs that were released by Vivalo very recently. My Qatar civ, if anybody's interested. I don't know, maybe. Rhodesia, I think, had... Ian Smith was still alive when it was released. I think he just died very recently.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
I did not know that.
Rest in peace, you fucking asshole. No, he died in 2007.
Oh, well. I might be looking at the picture wrong. Also, Mozambique. I think that's Tanzania. Chagos. Sadly, we will never include Chagos due to the fact that it is extremely unfair to put them in even consideration. Like,
I'm desperate to have Chagos in a CBR. I just gotta say.
I wish we could. I wish.
Can we put Chagos in CBR, but also have no civ
if we're doing
Indonesia, Western Australia, or Eastern Africa to make it fair?
If future Civ Battle Royales are done on a smaller map with somewhat fewer civs, we could just throw in Chagos for fun because there are extra civ slots.
Sure.
Yeah,
We're not using all 61.
I think Chagos should be the observer because they can never be in it.
Yeah, that'd be cute.
If there's extra civ slots, you could just put them in it. You don't.
I once made that recommendation as to who the observer civilization should be. Like, should be Chagos because they're the only ones that.
I feel even worse about it because I don't know if you're aware. I'm aware because I'm a Brit and a nerd about how fucked our politics are. But the Chagosian people don't live in Chagos. We kicked them out from an American military base.
Yeah, and
they live in England now.
Diego Garcia. Yeah, there's a conspiracy theory that MH370 was taken to Diego Garcia and it's still there.
Another fun fact is that a civilization that I've had in development for a little while, which is the Republic of Crimea, lasted a shorter amount of time than the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone.
Well, yeah, so did that fucking California Republic one. I'm the reason that California Republic aren't in the voting, so.
That may be changed because now that we thankfully have a lot of Californian historians, they found that, oh, well, there were actually thousands of people that followed behind William B. Ide and his idea of a Californian republic, so it wasn't as far-flung as we originally thought. Again, it's the issue that we brought up.
He controlled like a house.
No, he controlled far more than that. He had a military of 3,000 people.
He controlled like a town, but my objection to it is that the mod doesn't reflect that. The mod isn't a William B. Ide having one county mod. The mod is being like, this is the Republic of California with its capital at Sacramento and LA and San Francisco. And it's like, that's just incorrect. It's just not a coherent mod.
I mean, certainly there might be some changes that are required, but I would argue that, there's more conversation that needs to be had about it.
It would be up to the author of the mod to make those changes.
Right, that too. And on top of that...
Who is the mod? Is it Octoski?
No, it's not Octoski. I think it's Raw Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's definitely a bigger conversation because there are quite a few civs that we have excluded before that now we're starting to talk about. Maybe they should be included again. For example, we talked about in episode 1 Arcania and Patagonia, how they were once excluded, and now there's more information that has come to light that was.
I still feel very uncomfortable with that.
And SD Chile in the Discord still talks about how they Araucania and Patagonia is not a real thing.
But at the same time, there are a lot of Mapuche people who absolutely adore Aureli the First for a lot of reasons.
We literally have 2 Mapuche mods, so like.
Right,
Good.
right, but still, regardless of the fact that we do have Mapuche mods, it's still culturally important to people, and the fact that, there are people that recognize it as a real thing, even today, as silly as it
I don't
sounds.
know. I
you
would
know,
only ever be able to make. I'd only ever feel good about Araucania Patagonia being in if somebody was like, right, we're including Araucania and Patagonia or Pinochet of the Chile civs that are banned, and
Well,
and you get to pick one to keep banned, and I'm like, okay, keep Pinochet banned because fuck Pinochet. But
well, we can't include Pinochet because Pinochet doesn't work in a 61 Civ Battle Royale.
that's the best news I've heard all year.
It's literally just due to a coding issue where they just there's a problem with the DLL that prevents them from being in such a game.
I'd like to think it's also due to the fact that he was a fucking fascist and all the fucking alt-righters
Well,
idolize him.
it's also due to the fact that the mod is designed around being able to throw dissidents out of helicopters, which is extremely offensive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
it's
too. I mean, I don't blame the creator of the mod for making that and the way he did. But it is very touchy. The same way how, like, I believe that JFD made the Hitler mod very tastefully, but including it in voting regardless would be problematic.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Hitler mod is that it is tasteful. The equivalent would be if the Hitler mod had some like Holocaust mechanic or something. You know what I mean? It's like
Right. The
the
same
Hitler
way,
mod
the same
would
way
be
how
designed.
Ernot and I once talked about how we should make we should relate a Pol Pot civilization's Cambodia to something with the Cambodian genocide, and thankfully that mod never got made.
That's good.
That was like 6 years ago. My God.
Yeah, a Pol Pot mod just doesn't need to be made. There's nothing interesting that isn't horrific about Pol Pot. You know what I mean?
I agree.
Like he was just a horrific, horrible, evil ruler who just brought fucking misery onto his fucking country. There's just no need to make a mod of him. There's nothing interesting to do with it.
I mean, I would argue that for me, what is so great about the Civilization 5 modding community is that it really helps you learn about a lot of people and about a lot of individuals throughout history. Um,
Mm.
and even though, the argument would be, well, he was an awful person, why include him? I still also argue, well, make him anyways. If you have the interest of making him, make him. Just make it tastefully.
My argument is more just that there isn't anything interesting to do with him. Like, there's nothing interesting about his reign other than his genocidal idiocy. I mean, his anti-intellectualism, I guess. You definitely have to make it like a low science civ, but like
it's a neo-Luddite communist civilization, and the Khmer Rouge are extremely important in Cambodian history even today. The Khmer Rouge
true,
are
but
still
like they're
influential
important
even
because they
after
ruined
their
the country.
well,
They didn't turn it into some burgeoning communist superpower. They fucking decimated it.
yeah, absolutely. But speaking
They
from
basically the long list, the long. I mean, I went to Cambodia recently. The long lingering after effect of it is that now the country's economy is fucking entirely dependent on China. That's the main long link, and there's loads of fucking dead people. They're the long lingering impacts of the fucking Khmer Rouge.
right, and
Yeah.
we've made civilizations based on the lingering impact of civilizations absolutely destroying other civilizations. Just take the Huns as an example. I mean, I won't say the
We have
Mongolians
Beijing in
because
this game,
Mongolia is a
Yeah,
lot
but
more
the Huns
complex
destroyed
than we
other
give it credit
civilizations.
for.
That's the difference.
Well,
The
yeah,
Huns destroyed others. You can send them into a militaristic civ. There's something you can do with that. I don't know if there's a way to actively design a civ where like the main thing that the leader did was destroy his own country.
I mean, we made Indira
does
Gandhi, and
Curtis-
arguably
I mean,
she did a lot of damage to her country.
Doesn't
Yeah, okay.
Civ here have a sacrifice component? I mean, I'm not advocating
Yeah.
for it.
Anyway, I think we've gone like way off topic at this point.
Yeah, this is
The actual joke there was, guys.
PRCast, not
Hey.
PRCast.
Hey, there's a Donald Trump mod.
Well, that Donald Trump mod is one not taste. Well, those Donald Trump mods, I should say, are either
Sorry?
one not tastefully made, or two made as jokes, or three made by modders that
Yeah,
aren't.
the thing about that
qualified.
mod is it was made before Trump was president. It was literally a joke.
Yeah,
It was back when Trump being president was a joke.
it wasn't a joke to some people, evidently.
Well, yeah.
But regardless of politics, yeah, we are kind of off base. But like, regardless, I do want to say, I think there are conversations to be had about civilizations that were excluded from voting either this season or the previous season. For example, we excluded Ragusa due to a reading error, because it has been explicitly stated by the creator of the Ragusa mod that one city civilization mode can be turned off in its
I
settings.
never saw it because it was, yeah, I knew that from the start. I never understood why they were excluded.
Right.
But like, I'm open to including more. I mean, I'm open to even like my objections to California and stuff was based on the reading of the rules and the fact that it clearly went against the reading of the rules and it felt like it was getting exclusion just because it was a popular civ.
Right.
But like, I also throughout all of that said I'm not tied to the rules. If you want to change the rules, you can change the rules. You have to be consistent.
I'm
And I stick by that. I don't think I don't necessarily think a civ has to be. You know, I think really where I personally would draw the line out is civs like Pinochet and Hitler and Pride Lands. And actually, from a personal level, that's basically it. I
Yeah.
don't actually think I'd care if California or
Like, I
Oklahoma
wouldn't.
were in.
Yeah, I was like, I like California. Okay, we're getting, like I might draw the line past California, but I would definitely draw the line before like Nebraska.
right.
why?
I mean, I'm
no
still,
reason
I'm
to
still
do
in a
that.
position where I believe Rhode Island should be included in the voting no matter what because it does fit our criteria.
I'm right in the voting. Ireland and Vermont are the
I just
only
want all
two
the
states.
AIs
So
to
they
have
were
it.
included in season 1 voting and then they were excluded from season 2 voting.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, I wasn't involved with season 2 voting.
I mean,
In season 1,
they
it's
got.
Rhode Island, Vermont,
I believe they
Texas.
got second to last in season 1 voting in like
What
a
was
region
dead
of
last?
over 20. Oh, dead last in like a region of
Yeah.
nearly 30 civilization options. So I've always told people it's not like there's a concern that Rhode Island is going to win. I don't think there ever will be, but still,
fucking Rhode
out of
Island.
fairness, in my
Oh,
opinion.
sorry, Deseret is also usually given place. But yeah, I wouldn't care about Nebraska, but maybe I'm coming from British perspective of being like, well, they're all the states are the same to me. I don't read anything into California than I do from Nebraska. I mean, I do obviously. It's more of a cultural impact, but like, they're just US states. And at the same time, I feel very strongly that Northern Ireland should be included, even though that's never been an independent nation. But that's because
Northern
as a
Ireland
Brit,
would yeah,
as a Brit, I
think-
recognize Northern Ireland to
think
have its own.
if the
very
rules get relaxed next time, Northern Ireland's going to be eligible.
Right.
If the rules get relaxed at all.
In my opinion, we did make a mistake in voting where we kept promoting this idea that unique cultures, despite not being sovereign, do have an opportunity to be in voting, and then we specifically excluded Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and I like, I've been in Northern Ireland. It's a very specific place. It's not Ireland.
Right.
It's not Ireland at all. It's there are people there who will proudly tell you they are Northern Irish and not Irish. Like,
On the other hand,
it's a very important question, isn't it? I mean, it's a wonderful place, Northern Ireland, but it is weird. Like, you see signs for schools that say they're like mixed schools, and we were like, that's weird. It's weird to advertise it like a mixed boys and girls school. That's not what it means. When a school is specifically advertising that it's a mixed school and like making a big deal out of it, it means it's mixed Catholic and mixed Protestant, which was so wild to me as somebody who just never thought about religious difference in that way in England. Just like a 20-minute plane flight away in the same fucking sovereign state.
Speaking
Yeah,
as
that
an
is really weird.
American, mixed
Well,
school
you
in
drive
my
through-
head
you drive
either
through
implies
villages.
mixed genders or going back to the 1980s, desegregated school. So
Well, yeah, of course. But we never really had that in England. I mean,
Right.
we were only really in County Antrim, which is primarily a very strong Protestant area. But sometimes you would like drive through a village, and there would just be a Union Jack on every house, on every lamppost.
that's just anywhere in America. So
But
obviously,
I'd never seen a Union Jack in the UK flying
What you're
outside.
telling me is Northern Ireland is the Midwest.
Well, it's also difficult because you do have a level of Irish nationalism in Northern Ireland. I mean, we saw that based on the elections, or the most recently. Seeing that nationalist parties won in more rural parts of Northern Ireland, or nationalists won in parts of Scotland. Even though they're not that significant of a presence, it's still notable that there are going to be reactions to nationalism
There's
for specific cultural identity, to be like, no,
There's
we
like a
still
huge-
need to remain a part of the Union, for example.
Yeah, there's like a huge split in Northern Ireland. It literally just follows this one border every time, and one half of it all votes Sinn Féin, one half of it all votes DUP, and occasionally the other party gets a few says the socialists. But literally, it's like it's basically it's not quite as simple as just east and west half of the country, but it basically follows that line. So like your Derry area is very Catholic, and then your area around Antrim in the west and closer towards Scotland and England is usually very Protestant. And then the one place that's like a huge mix of the two is Belfast. But Belfast also has shit tons of fucking Berlin Wall like walls everywhere, splitting apart the Catholic and Protestant communities, like huge fences which never get talked about. They're called peace walls.
Oh,
Um,
I've seen them. I've watched Moon Boy. I was like, isn't it weird that they have these huge walls
Mm.
just in their backyards? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, so it's just like a segregation of
I think
religion.
that's the future that awaits America. Except it's not going to be Catholics and Protestants. It's going to be Republicans and Democrats.
Oh God, with how much violence is just occurring just between political parties, it blows my mind. But
There
let's
was
let
there was an article today that was showing how research shows that the two people who belong to the two political parties tend to live in place or overwhelmingly live in places where there are very few or no members of the other party,
mm,
like on the neighborhood level.
as a
mm.
teacher, strangely enough, one of my responsibilities in school is that when I notice radical thoughts or behavior, whether they're from the left or the right, I have not I haven't been told to do this, but because it could lead to violence, I either have to try to de-radicalize my student in the moment using something if it's based in a lie, like if it's based in a factual or a non-factual belief, or I have to just try and tell them, hey, we can't talk about that here, X, can't talk about it. It led
Yeah.
like it got so bad, like we actually had a racist incident in my school between, and again, I teach 12-year-olds. They're not politically savvy. A lot of them think they might be, but they're not, and so they'll say a
I
lot of
remember
things that they don't realize are problematic, and it gets them in a lot of trouble.
This is public school?
Yeah, I teach public schoolers.
Okay, I went to private school and we got radicalized as shit.
Oh well, I believe it.
I mean, my school honestly was doing the radicalizing. Like my Spanish teacher was a Marxist Leninist, and like actually actively spread her beliefs on campus.
In
I
college
went.
or in
Sister.
like pre-college.
No, high school.
All right, see you later. Sarah said, Sarah, have a good one.
You know, I live in York. York is what we would call the Champagne Socialist City of the UK. It's much like higher GDP, I guess, than a lot of the rest of Yorkshire, a lot of the rest of the north of England, but very left wing politics, but very mainstream left wing politics. And that was basically the school that I went to. It was a very mainstream left wing,
See,
very just be nice people left wing vibes.
when I went to school, I went to school in a kind of Republican town, but half and half split between Democrats and Republicans, but very moderate, very like nothing radical really. So I didn't really grow up with a lot of radical opinions. I got opinions that might have skirted a little bit further to mid left or mid right, but nothing too crazy. I just remember, recounting, oh, well, when I was in school, we got shown a picture of, it was like a T-chart, and on the left, it was like a dude dressed in a military uniform, a guy with some police officers who had a jacket on, and, a guy in a suit in front of the American flag, and just a couple other things. And then on the right, it was a picture of a group of Sikhs working in an office, a Muslim man praying next to his taxi cab, a lot of images of Muslim people. And so this was in middle school. So 7th grade, maybe 8th grade. And I remember my teacher saying, so I want you guys to write the first thought that comes to mind for people on the left and people on the right. And we would write things down like, I thankfully didn't write anything problematic down for either side. Like I wrote, oh, veteran, and I wrote, Muslim, India, stuff like that, Christian, politician. And then he comes up and he says, okay, so you guys do not have to share what you guys wrote down. But I've seen what some people have written down. And for example, people have, were confused when they saw the Muslim guy praying next to his cab and thought he was getting ready to bomb it. And meanwhile, he said, so you guys wrote politician, hero, veteran, stuff like that for this side, right? And we went, yeah. And he said, well, this is a picture of Timothy McVeigh. This is a picture of David Duke, the leader of the Ku Klux Klan. And this is a picture of Terry Nichols, one of Timothy McVeigh's associates. Basically teaching us, listen, you guys can look at a nice picture of anybody, but you guys, might unexpectedly just have these thoughts about people who are extremely innocent, haven't done anything wrong, and at the same time you'll see a picture of a person in a suit and you might just assume they're a politician when in reality they're one of the most volatile racists in the world. So
I mean, the good news is if I saw a picture of even when I was 12, if I saw a picture of a soldier and a policeman and a politician in Britain, I'd probably just write cunt.
see,
I think most of the class would as well.
We weren't trying to get in trouble in any class that wasn't math class. So
I feel like, I don't know. I feel like, ironically, ACAB and sentiments always feel a bit more mainstream in Britain, despite the fact that our police force are definitely objectively
far
so
better.
much less awful.
Yeah.
The de-escalation tactic. I mean, British police are one of the only few police forces in the world that routinely do not carry firearms, and the de-escalation tactics that they can use are some of the best in the world. They are still systematically racist and fucking awful, and as we've just seen with the fucking woman who was fucking murdered by a cop in London like a week ago, they're still fucking shit, and still all cops are bastards. But like, compared to over the pond, I'm always like, yeah, I mean, come on. And again, I live in York, where there's fucking no crime at all, so I can't have a privileged position
I would
here.
have reacted kind of like you. I was definitely, you know, old enough to like remember the Iraq War starting and like how much you know, and how much bullshit that was. And you know, suddenly like, oh, actually, you know, maybe the military and politicians are like not good people.
Before we
Not
get
military.
into situations like that where we talk about, you know, mayhaps sentiments that may be a little bit further flung than some of our viewers, the opinions that we are sharing are opinions that reflect only ourselves and our personal experiences. We are not telling you what to believe, but we do
These are
have
official Power Ranker stances. We're the three admins.
we do have to cut down the podcast, so I'm going to stop recording. We might as well sit around.
Hang on.
Okay. I was going to make
You
a
haven't
statement,
mentioned
but
you teased the big thing about BC and then never.
oh no
and
no
then
no!
never came.
I was going to talk about that. I was just
Oh,
saying,
okay,
you
cool.
know, if we are going to continue talking about politics, I will have to cut the stream or cut the recording.
No, I mean I'll have to go soon anyway.
Cut the recording, so I'm going to say what I need to say. So, for those of you who are still viewing, or for those of you who are viewing on YouTube, Koyot and Rian Monteris shared his announcement on the Discord. Koyot shared it on both the Discord and the Reddit. They will both be stepping down from Blue Cassette and the Civilization Battle Royale project. Koyot said that he'll still be involved in some minor ways, if I'm remembering correctly.
Actually, fairly major ways. He's going to continue running the website.
So he's going to continue running the website, that is correct. But it is important to note that, you know, 2 of our 4 leaders, the other 2 being Lunar and...
5.
Well, 5, including Dawkins, yep. So 2 of our 5 leaders have basically stepped down, and we still have Limerick Archer, and we still have Lunar, and we still have Dawkins.
Oh, Limerick Archer hasn't actually done... He actually technically stepped down a long time ago.
Oh, I was not aware.
Oh, okay.
He hasn't really done anything.
Regardless, this is something that we saw as inevitable. We just didn't know why it would be inevitable, in the sense that CBR is a project that is constantly evolving. The hierarchy is constantly changing, and there will be people that are going to fill the role if need be, until there comes a point where nobody can fill the role anymore. Greg is thankfully going to be partaking in culling of episodes and, you know, making sure that the right slides are being sent to narrators.
So is Lunar.
What was that?
And so is Lunar Needle.
And so is Lunar, correct. And so there are people stepping up to the plate, and other people stepping up to the plate would be very appreciated.
That does, of course, mean I should add that for the time being, Greg will no longer be power ranking and doing write-ups for us.
Yep.
That is correct. Since Greg knows the future,
Although,
he
Greg
can
is
no longer...
still welcome to do write-ups. Luna's done write-ups for us in the past, but Greg will no longer be ranking.
Greg will no longer be ranking because there is objectively he is biased based on what he has seen, and so that does mean that there are going to be a lot of changes going forward. I encourage you guys to thank Koyot and Rian, whether privately, publicly, whatever you need to do, or comment on whatever they've posted, and thanking them for their hard work. and know that the Civilization Battle Royale X2 will still go on, and hopefully it will still go on in the future. But right now we're in a little bit of a flux.
The big change is that the Observer will now be Chagos. That was it was really Lyman. It was really Rion and Koya that was stepping in the way of that one. But we're gonna push that through now.
Right. So
But
just
for real, if any of you guys have particular experience with modding, with tech stuff, with web stuff, I think that's kind of the roles that Koya, Lime, and Rion are kind of leaving behind. In particular, that do need to be filled. So go ahead, approach them.
and if you
See
have
what they
a
think. I'm not gonna, because I'm shit at coding.
if you have a particularly decent modern computer that you guys think could run the programs that we have running for our show, since Rion, our original game runner, is stepping down, we'd appreciate your presence, or maybe a donation, or maybe you could sell us some materials. It's up to you how you approach that, but we'd be quite appreciative of that.
If needs be, we can probably just get Sid Meier to run it, so I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Right.
I don't think he's doing much these days.
Right. Because otherwise we will encounter a point in time where Civilization Battle Royale for Civ 5 may no longer occur if we run out of materials and support and crew for that. Originally it was just T-Pang and I think one other person, and then it evolved into a 14 crew, and then it evolved into a 5-team crew, well, 4.5, and now we're stuck in a position where 2 of our core members are gone, and that's for very complicated reasons that I don't feel like I'm privy to share, especially since it was shared in a private server. But unless Rion pointed it out in his own post, which I have not personally read. But yeah,
which was kind of burnt out in the public post.
Yeah, that too. Rion has mentioned multiple times that he's burnt out, that his interest with the Civilization Battle Royale has gone away, and that happens for a lot of people. We saw it when people between Mark II and CBRX 1 just went, I'm not interested in this anymore. It's the reason why we don't have fan subreddits anymore for each and every civilization.
It's the reason we don't have Poom anymore.
Nobody was ever interested in those.
Are you kidding? I followed like 5 of them. I was a fan of the Armenia one. I was a fan of the Morocco one,
and none of the ones I was ever involved in ever had any posts.
What about
Philippine Bros had posts very occasionally.
Yakutia had
but it was
posts,
basically just me and
and
Forgy. We may as well just been a private message between me and Forgy.
Yeah, Yakutia and Sibir had posts too. Like, let's be fair.
I don't remember.
Well, they had like 3.
Should we wrap things up then? I think
I would see raps being posted in the Yakutia posts like all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot that was his thing.
Right. That was Trigger Darkon, and then Admiral Cloudberg replaced him as leader, and it was a fun time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, should we wrap things up there then? I think we've.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, guys, it has been a fun PRCast episode 3. If anybody is offended by the politics that we were sharing earlier,
you can cut it out of.
I mean, I don't really care to edit anything unless I feel like it's absolutely egregious. But just know that we're always going to have differing opinions on a lot of things. I certainly have differing opinions from Lax and from Cloudberg, and they would have differing opinions from me. And that goes for things that we've never even talked about before. It's partially due to where we were raised or where we work. And just know that we are not trying to tell you what to believe politically, and we are not trying to discourage you as members of the CBR community to fight us or to stop watching because you might not share our particular politics. Guys, you know what? I just got to show you this fucking slide change real quick. So note that great general next to Marienburg on the video. PARG Great General in the same exact spot. That's all. I was obsessed with that when I was listening to the audio narration. But yeah, I will try to make sure that we don't get too deep into politics in further episodes. Until then,
I will intentionally try to derail it further. So it'll be kind of fun, like play off between us.
But yeah, Thank you so much for listening to PRCast episode 3. This has been JMAngelo67, aka Video James, aka TickieJames, and I've been joined by Admiral
Admiral
Cloudberg.
Cloudberg. That's me.
I've been joined by
And
Lacsirax Ariscal.
Skull.
And I've also been joined by Shaggy Snorlax.
I stonks.
Yeah, by Stonks. Anyways,
Alright. Good night.
have a good night, guys.
Ciao.